Section 29 of the Book of Sir Marco Polo, the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Book of Sir Marco Polo, the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA, translated by Henry YULE. Book First. Chapter 45. Of the City of Etzina. When you leave the city of Campechu, you ride for 12 days and then reach a city called Etzina, which is towards the north on the verge of the sand desert. It belongs to the province of Tenduc. The people are idolaters and possess plenty of camels and cattle, and the country produces a number of good falcons, both sackers and laners. The inhabitants live by their cultivation and their cattle, for they have no trade. At this city you must needs lay in victuals for 40 days, because when you quit Etzina you enter on a desert which extends for 40 days' journey to the north, and on which you meet no habitation nor baiting place. In the summer-time, indeed, you will fall in with people, but in the winter the cold is too great. You also meet with wild beasts, for there are some small wood pines here and there, and with numbers of wild asses. When you have travelled these 40 days across the desert, you come to a certain province lying to the north. Its name you shall hear presently. Chapter 46. Of the City of Caracoron. Caracoron is a city some 3 miles in compass. It is surrounded by a strong earthen rampart, for stone is scarce there, and beside it there is a great citadel wherein is a fine palace in which the governor resides. 'Tis the first city that the Tartars possessed after they issued from their own country. And now I will tell you all about how they first acquired dominion and spread over the world. Originally the Tartars dwelt in the north, on the borders of Korcha. Their country was one of great plains. There were no towns or villages in it, but excellent pasture lands with great rivers and many sheets of water. In fact, it was a very fine and extensive region. But there was no sovereign in the land. They did, however, pay tax and tribute to a great prince who was called in their tongue Kaan, the same that we call Prester John, him in fact about whose great dominion all the world talks. The tribute he had of them was 1 beast out of every 10, and also a tithe of all their other gear. Now it came to pass that the Tartars multiplied exceedingly, and when Prester John saw how great a people they had become, he began to fear that he should have trouble from them. So he made a scheme to distribute them over sundry countries, and sent one of his barons to carry this out. When the Tartars became aware of this, they took it much amiss, and with one consent they left their country and went off across a desert to a distant region towards the north, where Prester John could not get at them to annoy them. Thus they revolted from his authority and paid him tribute no longer, and so things continued for a time. Chapter 47. Of Chinghis and how he became the first Kaan of the Tartars. Now it came to pass in the year of Christ's incarnation, 1187, that the Tartars made them a king whose name was Chinghis Kaan. He was a man of great worth, and of great ability, eloquence, and valour. And as soon as the news that he had been chosen king was spread abroad through those countries, all the Tartars in the world came to him and owned him for their lord. and right well did he maintain the sovereignty they had given him. What shall I say? The Tartars gathered to him in astonishing multitude, and when he saw such numbers, he made a great furniture of spears and arrows, and such other arms as they used, and set upon the conquest of all those regions, till he had conquered 8 provinces. When he conquered a province, he did no harm to the people or their property, but merely established some of his own men in the country, along with a proportion of theirs, whilst he led the remainder to the conquest of other provinces. And when those whom he had conquered became aware how well and safely he protected them against all others, and how they suffered no ill at his hands, and saw what a noble prince he was, then they joined him heart and soul, and became his devoted followers. And when he had thus gathered such a multitude that they seemed to cover the earth, he began to think of conquering a great part of the world. Now in the year of Christ 1200, he sent an embassy to Prester John, and desired to have his daughter to wife. But when Prester John heard that Chinghis Kaan demanded his daughter in marriage, he waxed very wroth, and said to the envoys, "What impudence is this, to ask my daughter to wife? Wist he not well that he was my liegeman and serf? Get ye back to him, and tell him that I had liever set my daughter in the fire than give her in marriage to him, and that he deserves death at my hand, rebel and traitor that he is." So he bade the envoys be gone at once, and never come into his presence again. The envoys, on receiving this reply, departed straightway, and made haste to their master, and related all that Prester John had ordered them to say, keeping nothing back. Chapter 48. How Chinghis mustered his people to march against Prester John. When Chinghis Kaan heard the brutal message that Prester John had sent him, such a rage seized him that his heart came nigh to bursting within him, for he was a man of a very lofty spirit. At last he spoke, and that so loud that all who were present could hear him. Never more might he be prince if he took not revenge for the brutal message of Prester John, and such revenge that insult never in this world was so dearly paid for. And before long Prester John should know whether he was his serf or no. So then he mustered all his forces, and levied such a host as never before was seen or heard of, sending word to Prester John to be on his defence. And when Prester John had sure tidings that Chinghis was really coming against him with such a multitude, he still professed to treat it as a jest and a trifle, for, quoth he, these be no soldiers. Natheless he marshalled his forces, and mustered his people, and made great preparations, in order that if Chinghis did come, he might take him and put him to death. In fact, he marshalled such a host of many different nations that it was a world's wonder. Both sides gat them ready to battle. And why should I make a long story of it? Chinghis Kaan with all his host arrived at a vast and beautiful plain which was called Tenduc, belonging to Prester John, and there he pitched his camp. And so great was the multitude of his people that it was impossible to number them. And when he got tidings that Prester John was coming, he rejoiced greatly, for the place afforded a fine and ample battle-ground, so he was right glad to tarry for him there, and greatly longed for his arrival. But now leave we Chinghis and his host, and let us return to Prester John and his people. Chapter 49. How Prester John marched to meet Chinghis. Now the story goes that when Prester John became aware that Chinghis with his host was marching against him, he went forth to meet him with all his forces, and advanced until he reached the same plain of Tenduc, and pitched his camp over against that of Chinghis Kaan at a distance of 20 miles. And then both armies remained at rest for 2 days, that they might be fresher and heartier for battle. So when the 2 great hosts were pitched on the plains of Tenduc, as you have heard, Chinghis Kaan one day summoned before him his astrologers, both Christian and Saracen, and desired them to let him know which of the 2 hosts would gain the battle, his own or Prester John's. The Saracens tried to ascertain, but were unable to give a true answer. The Christians, however, did give a true answer, and showed manifestly beforehand how the event should be. For they got a cane and split it lengthwise, and laid 1/2 on this side and 1/2 on that, allowing no one to touch the pieces. And one of the pieces of cane they called Chinghis Kaan, and the other piece they called Prester John. And then they said to Chinghis, "Now mark, and you will see the event of the battle, and who shall have the best of it. For whose cane soever shall be above the other, to him shall victory be." He replied that he would fain see it, and bade them begin. Then the Christian astrologers read a psalm out of the Psalter, and went through other incantations. And lo, whilst all were beholding, the cane that bore the name of Chinghis Kaan, without being touched by anybody, advanced to the other that bore the name of Prester John, and got on top of it. When the prince saw that, he was greatly delighted, and seeing how this matter had found the Christians to tell the truth, he always treated them with great respect, and held them for men of truth for ever after. Chapter 50. The battle between Chinghis Kaan and Prester John. And after both sides had rested well those 2 days, they armed for the fight and engaged in desperate combat. And it was the greatest battle that was ever seen. The numbers that were slain on both sides were very great, but in the end Chinghis Kaan obtained the victory. And in the battle Prester John was slain. And from that time forward, day by day, his kingdom passed into the hands of Chinghis Kaan till the whole was conquered. I may tell you that Chinghis Kaan reigned 6 years after this battle, engaged continually in conquest, and in taking many a province and city and stronghold. But at the end of those 6 years he went against a certain castle that was called Carju, and there he was shot with an arrow in the knee, so that he died of his wound. A great pity it was, for he was a valiant man and a wise. I will now tell you who reigned after Chinghis, and then about the manners and customs of the Tartars. Chapter 51. Of those who did reign after Chinghis Kaan, and of the customs of the Tartars. Now the next that reigned after Chinghis Kaan, their first lord, was Kublay Kaan, and the third prince was Batu Kaan, and the fourth was Alaku Kaan, and the fifth Mongu Kaan, and the sixth Kublay Kaan, who is the sovereign now reigning, and is more potent than any of the 5 who went before him. In fact, if you were to take all those 5 together, they would not be so powerful as he is. Nay, I will say yet more, for if you were to put together all the Christians in the world, with their emperors and their kings, the whole of these Christians, aye, and throw in the Saracens to boot, would not have such power or be able to do so much as this Kublay, who is the lord of all the Tartars in the world, those of the Levant and of the Ponent included, for these are all liegemen and subjects. I mean to show you all about this great power of his in this book of ours. You should be told also that all the great Khans and all the descendants of Chinghis, their first lord, are carried to a mountain that is called Altay to be interred. Wheresoever the sovereign may die, he is carried to his burial in that mountain with his predecessors, No matter that the place of his death were 100 days' journey distance, thither must he be carried to his burial. Let me tell you a strange thing too. When they are carrying the body of any emperor to be buried with the others, the convoy that goes with the body doth put to the sword all whom they fall in with on the road, saying, Go and wait upon your lord in the other world. For they do in sooth believe that all such as they slay in this manner do go to serve their lord in the other world. They do the same too with horses, for when the emperor dies, they kill all his best horses, in order that he may have the use of them in the other world, as they believe. And I tell you as a certain truth, that when Mongu Khan died, more than 20,000 persons, who chanced to meet the body on its way, were slain in the manner that I have told. End of section 29. Reading by alanmapstone in Oxford, England.
Section 30 of The Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA. Translated by Henry YULE. Book First, Chapters 52 to 54. Chapter 52. Concerning the Customs of the Tartars. Now that we've begun to speak of the Tartars, I have plenty to tell you on that subject. The Tartar custom is to spend the winter in warm plains, where they find good pasture for their cattle, whilst in summer they betake themselves to a cool climate, among the mountains and valleys, where water is to be found, as well as woods and pastures. Their houses are circular, and are made of wands covered with felts. These are carried along with them whithersoever they go, for the wands are so strongly bound together, and likewise so well combined, that the frame can be made very light. Whenever they erect these huts, the door is always to the south. They also have wagons covered with black felt so efficaciously that no rain can get in. These are drawn by oxen and camels, and the women and children travel in them. The women do the buying and selling, and whatever is necessary to provide for the husband and household, for the men all lead the life of gentlemen, troubling themselves about nothing but hunting and hawking, and looking after the goshawks and falcons, unless it be the practice of warlike exercises. They live on the milk and meat which their herds supply, and on the produce of the chase, and they eat all kinds of flesh, including that of horses and dogs, and pharaohs' rats, of which last there are great numbers in burrows on those plains. Their drink is mare's milk. They are very careful not to meddle with each other's wives, and will not do so on any account, holding that to be an evil and abominable thing. The women too are very good and loyal to their husbands, and notable housewives withal. 10 or 20 of them will dwell together in charming peace and unity, nor shall you ever hear an ill word among them. The marriage customs of Tartars are as follows. Any man may take 100 wives, an he so please, and if he be able to keep them. But the first wife is ever held most in honour, and as the most legitimate, and the same applies to the sons whom she may bear. The husband gives a marriage payment to his wife's mother, and the wife brings nothing to her husband. They have more children than other people, because they have so many wives. They may marry their cousins, and if a father dies, his son may take any of the wives, his own mother always excepted. That is to say, the eldest son may do this, but no other. A man may also take the wife of his own brother, after the latter's death. Their weddings are celebrated with great ado. Chapter 53. Concerning the God of the Tartars. This is the fashion of their religion. They say there is a most high God of heaven, whom they worship daily with thurible and incense, but they pray to him only for health of mind and body. But they have also a certain other god of theirs called Natigai, and they say he is the god of the earth, who watches over their children, cattle, and crops. They show him great worship and honour, and every man hath a figure of him in his house, made of felt and cloth. And they also make in the same manner images of his wife and children. The wife they put on the left hand and the children in front. And when they eat, they take the fat of the meat and grease the god's mouth withal, as well as the mouths of his wife and children. Then they take of the broth and sprinkle it before the door of the house. And that done, they deem that their god and his family have had their share of the dinner. Their drink is mare's milk, prepared in such a way that you would take it for white wine, and a right good drink it is, called by them camise. The clothes of the wealthy Tartars are for the most part of gold and silk stuffs, lined with costly furs, such as sable and ermine, vair and fox skin, in the richest fashion. Chapter 54. Concerning the Tartar customs of war. All their harness of war is excellent and costly. Their arms are bows and arrows, sword and mace, but above all the bow, for they are capital archers, indeed the best that are known. On their backs they wear armour of curbuli, prepared from buffalo and other hides, which is very strong. They are excellent soldiers, and passing valiant in battle. They are also more capable of hardships than other nations, for many a time, if need be, they will go for a month without any supply of food, living only on the milk of their mares and on such game as their bows may win them. Their horses also will subsist entirely on the grass of the plains, so that there is no need to carry store of barley or straw or oats, and they are very docile to their riders. These, in case of need, will abide on horseback the livelong night, armed at all points, while the horse will be continually grazing. Of all troops in the world, these are they which endure the greatest hardship and fatigue, and which cost the least, and they are the best of all for making wide conquests of country. And this you will perceive from what you have heard and shall hear in this book. And, as a fact, there can be no manner of doubt that now they are the masters of the biggest half of the world. Their troops are admirably ordered in the manner that I shall now relate. You see, when a Tartar prince goes forth to war, he takes with him, say, 100,000 horse. Well, he appoints an officer to every 10 men, one to every 100, one to every 1,000, and one to every 10,000, so that his own orders have to be given to 10 persons only, and each of these 10 persons has to pass the orders only to other 10, and so on, no one having to give orders to more than 10. And every one in turn is responsible only to the officer immediately over him, and the discipline and order that comes of this method is marvellous, for they are a people very obedient to their chiefs. Further, they call the corps of 100,000 men a tuck, that of 10,000 they call a toman, the 1,000 they call blank, the 100 gaz, the 10 blank. And when the army is on the march, they have always 200 horsemen very well mounted, who are sent a distance of 2 marches in advance to reconnoitre, and these always keep ahead. They have a similar party detached in the rear, and on either flank, so that there is a good lookout kept on all sides against a surprise. When they are going on a distant expedition, they take no gear with them except 2 leather bottles for milk, a little earthenware pot to cook their meat in, and a little tent to shelter them from rain. And in case of great urgency, they will ride 10 days on end without lighting a fire or taking a meal. On such an occasion they will sustain themselves on the blood of their horses, opening a vein and letting the blood jet into their mouths, drinking till they have had enough, and then staunching it. They also have milk dried into a kind of paste to carry with them, and when they need food they put this in water, and beat it up till it dissolves, and then drink it. It is prepared in this way. they boil the milk, and when the rich part floats on the top, they skim it into another vessel, and of that they make butter, for the milk will not become solid till this is removed. Then they put the milk in the sun to dry. And when they go on an expedition, every man takes some 10 pounds of this dried milk with him. And of a morning he will take a half pound of it and put it in his leather bottle, with as much water as he pleases. So as he rides along, the milk paste and the water in the bottle get well churned together into a kind of pap, and that makes his dinner. When they come to an engagement with the enemy, they will gain the victory in this fashion. They never let themselves get into a regular medley, but keep perpetually riding round and shooting into the enemy. And as they do not count it any shame to run away in battle, they will sometimes pretend to do so, and in running away they turn in the saddle and shoot hard and strong at the foe, and in this way make great havoc. Their horses are trained so perfectly that they will double hither and thither just like a dog, in a way that is quite astonishing. Thus they fight to as good purpose in running away as if they stood and faced the enemy, because of the vast volleys of arrows that they shoot in this way, turning round upon their pursuers, who are fancying that they have won the battle. But when the Tartars see that they have killed and wounded a good many horses and men, they wheel round bodily and return to the charge in perfect order and with loud cries, and in a very short time the enemy are routed. In truth they are stout and valiant soldiers, and inured to war. And you perceive that it is just when the enemy sees them run, and imagines that he has gained the battle, that he has in reality lost it. For the Tartars wheel round in a moment when they judge the right time has come. And after this fashion they have won many a fight. All this that I have been telling you is true of the manners and customs of the genuine Tartars. But I must add also that in these days they are greatly degenerated, for those who are settled in Cathay have taken up the practices of the idolaters of the country, and have abandoned their own institutions, whilst those who have settled in the Levant have adopted the customs of the Saracens. End of section 30.
Section 31 of the Book of Ser Marco Polo, the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lynne Thompson. The Book of Ser Marco Polo, the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. By Rustichello da PISA. Translated by Henry YULE. Section 31. Book First, Chapters 55 to 58. Concerning the administering of justice among the Tartars. Sundry particulars on the plain beyond Caracoron. Of the kingdom of Erguiul, and province of Sinju. Of the kingdom of Egrigaia. Book First, Chapter 55. Concerning the administering of justice among the Tartars. The way they administer justice is this. When anyone has committed a petty theft, they give him, under the orders of authority, 7 blows of a stick, or 17, or 27, or 37, or 47, and so forth, always increasing by tens in proportion to the injury done, and running up to 107. Of these beatings sometimes they die. But if the offence be horse-stealing, or some other great matter, they cut the thief in two with a sword. Howbeit, if he be able to ransom himself by paying 9 times the value of the thing stolen, he is let off. Every lord or other person who possesses beasts has them marked with his peculiar brand, be they horses, mares, camels, oxen, cows, or other great cattle, and then they are sent abroad to graze over the plains, without any keeper. They get all mixed together, but eventually every beast is recovered by means of its owner's brand, which is known. For their sheep and goats they have shepherds. All their cattle are remarkably fine, big, and in good condition. They have another notable custom, which is this: if any man have a daughter who dies before marriage, and another man have had a son also die before marriage, the parents of the two arrange a grand wedding between the dead lad and lass. And marry them they do, making a regular contract. And when the contract papers are made out, they put them in the fire, in order, as they will have it, that the parties in the other world may know the fact, and so look on each other as man and wife. And the parents thenceforward consider themselves sib to each other, just as if their children had lived and married. Whatever may be agreed on between the parties as dowry, those who have to pay it cause to be painted on pieces of paper, and then put these in the fire, saying that in that way the dead person will get all the real articles in the other world. Now I have told you all about the manners and customs of the Tartars, but you have heard nothing yet of the great state of the Grand Kaan, who is the lord of all the Tartars, and of the supreme imperial court. All that I will tell you in this book in proper time and place, but meanwhile I must return to my story, which I left off in that great plain when we began to speak of the Tartars. Book First, Chapter 56. Sundry particulars of the plain beyond Caracoron. And when you leave Caracoron and the Altay, in which they bury the bodies of the Tartar sovereigns, as I told you, you go north for 40 days till you reach a country called the plain of Bargu. The people there are called Mescript. They are a very wild race, and live by their cattle, the most of which are stags, and these stags, I assure you, they used to ride upon. Their customs are like those of the Tartars, and they are subject to the Great Kaan. They have neither corn nor wine. They get birds for food, for the country is full of lakes and pools and marshes, which are much frequented by the birds when they are moulting, and when they have quite cast their feathers and can't fly, those people catch them. They also live partly on fish. And when you have travelled 40 days over this great plain, you come to the ocean, at the place where the mountains are, in which the peregrine falcons have their nests. And in those mountains it is so cold that you find neither man or woman, nor beast nor bird, except one kind of bird called barguelac, on which the falcons feed. They are as big as partridges, and have feet like those of parrots, and a tail like a swallow's, and are very strong in flight. And when the Grand Kaan wants peregrines from the nest, he sends thither to procure them. It is also on islands in that sea that the gerfalcons are bred. You must know that the place is so far to the north that you leave the North Star somewhat behind you towards the south. The gerfalcons are so abundant there that the Emperor can have as many as he likes to send for, and you must not suppose that those gerfalcons, which the Christians carry into the Tartar dominions, go to the Great Kaan. They are carried only to the Prince of the Levant. Now I have told you all about the provinces northward as far as the ocean sea, beyond which there is no more land at all. So I shall proceed to tell you of the other provinces on the way to the Grand Kaan. Let us then return to that province of which I spoke before, called Campechu. Book First, Chapter 57. Of the Kingdom of Erguiul and Province of Sinju. On leaving Campechu, then, you travel 5 days across a tract in which many spirits are heard speaking in the night season, and at the end of those 5 marches towards the east, you come to a kingdom called Erguiul, belonging to the Great Kaan. It is one of the several kingdoms which make up the great province of Tangut. The people consist of Nestorian Christians, idolaters, and worshippers of Mahomet. There are plenty of cities in this kingdom, but the capital is called Erguiul. You can travel in a southeasterly direction from this place into the province of Cathay. Should you follow that road to the southeast, you come to a city called Sinju, belonging also to Tangut, and subject to the Great Kaan, which has under it many towns and villages. The population is composed of idolaters and worshippers of Mahomet, but there are some Christians also. There are wild cattle in that country, almost as big as elephants, splendid creatures, covered everywhere but on the back with shaggy hair, a good 4 palms long. They are partly black, partly white, and really wonderfully fine creatures, and the hair or wool is extremely fine and white, finer and whiter than silk. Messer Marco brought some to Venice as a great curiosity, and so it was reckoned by those who saw it. There are plenty of them tame, which have been caught young. They also cross these with the common cow, and the cattle from this cross are wonderful beasts, and better for work than other animals. These the people use commonly for burden and general work, and in the plough as well, and at the latter they will do full twice as much work as any other cattle, being such very strong beasts. In this country too is found the best musk in the world, and I will tell you how 'tis produced. There exists in that region a kind of wild animal like a gazelle. It has feet and tail like the gazelle's, and stag's hair of a very coarse kind, but no horns. It has 4 tusks, 2 below and 2 above, about 3 inches long, and slender in form, one pair growing upwards, and the other downwards. It is a very pretty creature. The musk is found in this way. When the creature has been taken, they find at the navel between the flesh and the skin something like an impostume full of blood, which they cut out and remove with all the skin attached to it. And the blood inside this impostume is the musk that produces that powerful perfume. There is an immense number of these beasts in the country we are speaking of. The flesh is very good to eat. Messer Marco brought the dried head and feet of one of these animals to Venice with him. The people are traders and artisans, and also grow abundance of corn. The province has an extent of 26 days' journey. Pheasants are found there twice as big as ours, indeed nearly as big as a peacock, and having tails of 7 to 10 palms in length, and besides them other pheasants in aspect like our own, and birds of many other kinds, and of beautiful variegated plumage. The people, who are idolaters, are fat folks with little noses and black hair, and no beard except a few hairs on the upper lip. The women too have very smooth and white skins, and in every respect are pretty creatures. The men are very sensual, and marry many wives, which is not forbidden by their religion. No matter how base a woman's descent may be, if she have beauty she may find a husband among the greatest men in the land, the man paying the girl's father and mother a great sum of money, according to the bargain that may be made. Book First, Chapter 58. Of the Kingdom of Egrigaia. Starting again from Erguiul, you ride eastward for 8 days, and then come to a province called Egrigaia, containing numerous cities and villages, and belonging to Tangut. The capital city is called Kalachan. The people are chiefly idolaters, but there are fine churches belonging to the Nestorian Christians. They are all subjects of the great Kaan. They make in this city great quantities of camlets of camel's wool, the finest in the world, and some of the camlets that they make are white, for they have white camels, and these are the best of all. Merchants purchase these stuffs here, and carry them all over the world for sale. We shall now proceed eastward from this place, and enter the territory that was formerly Prester John's. End of Section 31.
Section 32 of the Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, Concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Roberts. The Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, Concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA. Translated by Henry YULE. Book First, Chapters 59 to 61. Chapter 59, Concerning the Province of Tenduc and the Descendants of Prester John. Tenduc is a province which lies towards the east, and contains numerous towns and villages, among which is the chief city, also called Tenduc. The king of the province is of the lineage of Prester John, George by name, and he holds the land under the great Kaan. Not that he holds anything like the whole of what Prester John possessed. It is a custom, I may tell you, that these kings of the lineage of Prester John always obtain to wife either daughters of the great Kaan or other princesses of his family. In this province is found the stone from which azure is made. It is obtained from a kind of vein in the earth and is of very fine quality. There is also a great manufacture of fine camlets of different colors from camel's hair. The people get their living by their cattle and tillage, as well as by trade and handicraft. The rule of the province is in the hands of the Christians, as I have told you, but there are also plenty of idolaters and worshippers of Mahomet. And there is also here a class of people called Argons, which is as much as to say in French Guasmoul, or in other words, sprung from two different races, to wit, of the race of the idolaters of Tenduc, and of that of the worshippers of Mahomet. They are handsomer men than the other natives of the country, and having more ability, they come to have authority, and they are also capital merchants. You must know that it was in this same capital city of Tenduc that Prester John had the seat of his government when he ruled over the Tartars, and his heirs still abide there, for, as I have told you, this King George is of his line. In fact, he is the sixth in descent from Prester John. Here also is what we call the country of Gog and Magog. They, however, call it Ung and Mungol, after the names of two races of people that existed in that province before the migration of the Tartars. Ung was the title of the people of the country, and Mongol a name sometimes applied to the Tartars. And when you have ridden 7 days eastward through this province, you can get near the provinces of Cathay. You find throughout those 7 days' journey plenty of towns and villages, the inhabitants of which are Mohammedans, but with a mixture also of idolaters and Nestorian Christians. They get their living by trade and manufactures, weaving those fine cloths of gold which are called nasich and nukes, besides silk stuffs of many other kinds. For just as we have cloths of wool in our country, manufactured in a great variety of kinds, so in those regions they have stuffs of silk and gold in like variety. All this region is subject to the great Kaan. There is a city you come to called Sinju, where they carry on a great many crafts such as provide for the equipment of the emperor's troops. In a mountain of the province there is a very good silver mine, from which much silver is got. The place is called Idifu. The country is well stocked with game, both beast and bird. Now we will quit that province and go 3 days' journey forward. Chapter 60, concerning the Kaan's palace of Chagannor. At the end of those 3 days, you find a city called Chagannor, which is as much as to say White Pool, at which there is a great palace of the Grand Kaan's, and he likes much to reside there on account of the lakes and rivers in the neighborhood, which are the haunt of swans and of a great variety of other birds. The adjoining plains, too, abound with cranes, partridges, pheasants, and other game birds, so that the emperor takes all the more delight in staying there, in order to go a-hawking with his gerfalcons and other falcons, a sport of which he is very fond. There are 5 different kinds of cranes found in those tracts, as I shall tell you. First, there is one which is very big, and all over as black as a crow. The second kind again is all white, and is the biggest of all. Its wings are really beautiful, for they are adorned with round eyes like those of a peacock, but of a resplendent golden color, whilst the head is red and black on a white ground. The third kind is the same as ours. The fourth is a small kind, having at the ears beautiful long pendant feathers of red and black. The fifth kind is grey all over, and of great size, with a handsome head red and black. Near this city there is a valley in which the emperor has had several little houses erected, in which he keeps in mew a large number of cators, which are what we call the great partridge. You would be astonished to see what a quantity there are, with men to take charge of them. So whenever the Kaan visits the place, he is furnished with as many as he wants. Chapter 61, of the city of Chandu and the Kaan's palace there. And when you have ridden 3 days from the city last mentioned, between northeast and north, you come to a city called Chandu, which was built by the Kaan now reigning. There is at this place a very fine marble palace, the rooms of which are all gilt and painted with figures of men and beasts and birds, and with a variety of trees and flowers, all executed with such exquisite art that you regard them with delight and astonishment. Round this palace a wall is built, enclosing a compass of 16 miles, and inside the park there are fountains and rivers and brooks, and beautiful meadows with all kinds of wild animals, excluding such as are of ferocious nature, which the emperor has procured and placed there to supply food for his gerfalcons and hawks, which he keeps there in mew. Of these there are more than 200 gerfalcons alone, without reckoning the other hawks. The Kaan himself goes every week to see his birds sitting in mew, and sometimes he rides through the park with a leopard behind him on his horse's croup, and then if he sees any animal that takes his fancy, he slips his leopard at it, and the game, when taken, is made over to feed the hawks in mew. This he does for diversion. Moreover, at a spot in the park where there is a charming wood, he has another palace built of cane, of which I must give you a description. It is gilt all over, and most elaborately finished inside. It is stayed on gilt and lacquered columns, on each of which is a dragon all gilt, the tail of which is attached to the column, whilst the head supports the architrave, and the claws likewise are stretched out right and left to support the architrave. The roof, like the rest, is formed of canes, covered with a varnish so strong and excellent that no amount of rain will rot them. These canes are a good 3 palms in girth, and from 10 to 15 paces in length. They are cut across at each knot, and then the pieces are split so as to form from each 2 hollow tiles, and with these the house is roofed. Only every such tile of cane has to be nailed down to prevent the wind from lifting it. In short, the whole palace is built of these canes, which, I may mention, serve also for a great variety of other useful purposes. The construction of the palace is so devised that it can be taken down and put up again with great celerity, and it can all be taken to pieces and removed whithersoever the emperor may command. When erected, it is braced, against mishaps from the wind, by more than 200 cords of silk. The Lord abides at this park of his, dwelling sometimes in the marble palace, and sometimes in the cane palace for 3 months of the year, to wit, June, July, and August, preferring this residence because it is by no means hot. In fact, it is a very cool place. When the 28th day of the moon of August arrives, he takes his departure, and the cane palace is taken to pieces. But I must tell you what happens when he goes away from this palace every year on the 28th of the August moon. You must know that the Kaan keeps an immense stud of white horses and mares, in fact more than 10,000 of them, and all pure white without a speck. The milk of these mares is drunk by himself and his family, and by none else, except by those of one great tribe that have also the privilege of drinking it. This privilege was granted them by Chinghis Kaan, on account of a certain victory that they helped him to win long ago. The name of the tribe is Horiad. Now when these mares are passing across the country, and any one falls in with them, be he the greatest lord in the land, he must not presume to pass until the mares have gone by. He must either tarry where he is, or go a half-day's journey round if need so be, so as not to come nigh them, for they are to be treated with the greatest respect. Well, when the Lord sets out from the park on the 28th of August, as I told you, the milk of all those mares is taken and sprinkled on the ground, and this is done on the injunction of the idolaters and idol priests, who say that it is an excellent thing to sprinkle that milk on the ground every 28th of August, so that the earth and the air and the false gods shall have their share of it, and the spirits likewise that inhabit the air and the earth. And thus those beings will protect and bless the Kaan, and his children, and his wives, and his folk, and his gear, and his cattle, and his horses, his corn, and all that is his. After this is done, the emperor is off and away. But I must now tell you a strange thing that hitherto I have forgotten to mention. During the 3 months of every year that the Lord resides at that place, if it should happen to be bad weather, there are certain crafty enchanters and astrologers in his train, who are such adepts in necromancy and the diabolic arts, that they are able to prevent any cloud or storm from passing over the spot on which the emperor's palace stands. The sorcerers who do this are called Tebet and Kesimur, which are the names of 2 nations of idolaters. Whatever they do in this way is by the help of the devil, but they make those people believe that it is compassed by dint of their own sanctity and the help of God. They always go in a state of dirt and uncleanness, devoid of respect for themselves, or for those who see them, unwashed, unkempt, and sordidly attired. These people also have a custom, which I must tell you, If a man is condemned to death and executed by the lawful authority, they take his body and cook and eat it. But if anyone die a natural death, then they will not eat the body. There is another marvel performed by those Baxi, of whom I have been speaking as knowing so many enchantments. For when the great Kaan is at his capital, and in his great palace, seated at his table, which stands on a platform some 8 cubits above the ground, his cups are set before him, on a great buffet, in the middle of the hall pavement, at a distance of some 10 paces from his table, and filled with wine, or other good spiced liquor such as they use. Now when the Lord desires to drink, those enchanters, by the power of their enchantments, cause the cups to move from their place without being touched by anybody, and to present themselves to the emperor. This every one present may witness, and there are oft times more than 10,000 persons thus present. 'Tis a truth and no lie, and so will tell you the sages of our own country who understand necromancy, for they also can perform it. And when the idol festivals come round, these Baxi go to the prince and say, Sire, the feast of such a god is come, naming him. My lord, you know, the enchanter will say, that this god, when he gets no offerings, always sends bad weather and spoils our seasons. So we pray you to give us such and such a number of black-faced sheep, naming whatever number they please. And we beg also, good my lord, that we may have such a quantity of incense, and such a quantity of lignalos, and so much of this, so much of that, and so much of t'other, according to their fancy, that we may perform a solemn service and a great sacrifice to our idols, and that so they may be induced to protect us and all that is ours. The Baxi say these things to the barons entrusted with the stewardship, who stand round the great Kaan, and these repeat them to the Kaan, and he then orders the barons to give everything that the Baxi have asked for. And when they have got the articles, they go and make a great feast in honor of their god, and hold great ceremonies of worship, with grand illuminations and quantities of incense of a variety of odors, which they make up from different aromatic spices. And then they cook the meat, and set it before the idols, and sprinkle the broth hither and thither, saying that in this way the idols get their bellyful. Thus it is that they keep their festivals. You must know that each of the idols has a name of his own, and a feast day, just as our saints have their anniversaries. They also have immense minsters and abbeys, some of them as big as a small town, with more than 2,000 monks, that is, after their fashion, in a single abbey. These monks dress more decently than the rest of the people, and have the head and beard shaven. There are some among these Baxi who are allowed by their rule to take wives, and who have plenty of children. Then there is another kind of devotees called sensin, who are men of extraordinary abstinence after their fashion, and lead a life of such hardship as I will describe. All their life long they eat nothing but bran, which they take mixed with hot water. That is their food, bran and nothing but bran, and water for their drink. 'Tis a lifelong fast, so that I may well say their life is one of extraordinary asceticism. They have great idols and plenty of them, but they sometimes also worship fire. The other idolaters, who are not of this sect, call these people heretics, Petarius, as we would say, because they do not worship their idols in their own fashion. Those of whom I am speaking would not take a wife on any consideration. They wear dresses of hempen stuff, black and blue, and sleep upon mats. In fact, their asceticism is something astonishing. Their idols are all feminine, that is to say, they have women's names. Now let us have done with this subject, and let me tell you of the great state and wonderful magnificence of the great Lord of Lords, I mean that great prince who is the sovereign of the Tartars, Kublay by name, the most noble and puissant lord. End of section 32.
Section 33 of The Book of Sir Marco Polo, the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Book of Sir Marco Polo, the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA. Translated by Henry YULE. Book 2nd, Part 1. Chapters 1 to 4. Part 1. The Kaan, his Court and Capital. Chapter 1. Of Kublay Kaan, the great Kaan now reigning, and of his great puissance. Now am I come to that part of our book in which I shall tell you of the great and wonderful magnificence of the great Kaan now reigning, by name Kublay Kaan, Kaan being a title which signifieth the great Lord of Lords, or Emperor. And of a surety he hath good right to such a title, for all men know for a certain truth that he is the most potent man, as regards forces and lands and treasure, that existeth in the world, or ever hath existed from the time of our first father Adam until this day. All this I will make clear to you for truth in this book of ours, so that every one shall be fain to acknowledge that he is the greatest lord that is now in the world, or ever hath been. And now you shall hear how and wherefore. Chapter 2. Concerning the revolt of Nayan, who was uncle to the great Kaan Cublay. Now this Kublay Kaan is of the right imperial lineage, being descended from Chinghis Kaan, the first sovereign of all the Tartars, and he is the sixth lord in that succession, as I have already told you in this book. He came to the throne in the year of Christ 1256, and the empire fell to him because of his ability and valour and great worth, as was right and reason. His brothers indeed and other kinsmen disputed his claim, but his it remained, both because maintained by his great valour, and because it was in law and right his, as being directly sprung of the imperial line. Up to the year of Christ now running, to wit 1298, he hath reigned 42 years, and his age is about 85, so that he must have been about 43 years of age when he first came to the throne. Before that time he had often been to the wars, and had shown himself a gallant soldier and an excellent captain. But after coming to the throne he never went to the wars in person save once. This befell in the year of Christ 1286, and I will tell you why he went. There was a great Tartar chief, whose name was Nayan, a young man of 30, lord over many lands and many provinces, and he was uncle to the Emperor Kublay Kaan of whom we are speaking. And when he found himself in authority, this Nayan waxed proud in the insolence of his youth and his great power, for indeed he could bring into the field 300,000 horsemen, though all the time he was liegeman to his nephew, the great Kaan Cublay, as was right and reason. Seeing then what great power he had, he took it into his head that he would be the great Kaan's vassal no longer, nay more, he would fain wrest his empire from him if he could. So this Nayan sent envoys to another Tartar prince called Chandu, also a great and potent lord, who was a kinsman of his, and who was a nephew of the great Kaan, and his lawful liegeman also, though he was in rebellion and at bitter enmity with his sovereign lord and uncle. Now the message that Nayan sent was this, that he himself was making ready to march against the great Kaan with all his forces, which were great, and he begged Chandu to do likewise from his side, so that by attacking Kublay on two sides at once with such great forces they would be able to wrest his dominion from him. And when Chandu heard the message of Nayan, he was right glad thereat, and thought the time was come at last to gain his object. So he sent back answer that he would do as requested, and got ready his host, which mustered a good 100,000 horsemen. Now let us go back to the great Kaan, who had news of all this plot. Chapter 3. How the great Kaan marched against Nayan. When the great Kaan heard what was afoot, he made his preparations in right good heart, like one who feared not the issue of an attempt so contrary to justice. Confident in his own conduct and prowess, he was in no degree disturbed, but vowed that he would never wear crown again if he brought not those two traitorous and disloyal Tartar chiefs to an ill end. So swiftly and secretly were his preparations made that no one knew of them but his privy council, and all were completed within 10 or 12 days. In that time he had assembled good 360,000 horsemen and 100,000 footmen, but a small force indeed for him, and consisting only of those that were in the vicinity. For the rest of his vast and innumerable forces were too far off to answer so hasty a summons, being engaged under orders from him on distant expeditions to conquer divers countries and provinces. If he had waited to summon all his troops, the multitude assembled would have been beyond all belief, a multitude such as never was heard of or told of, past all counting. In fact, those 360,000 horsemen that he got together consisted merely of the falconers and whippers-in that were about the court. And when he had got ready this handful, as it were, of his troops, he ordered his astrologers to declare whether he should gain the battle and get the better of his enemies. After they had made their observations, they told him to go on boldly, for he would conquer and gain a glorious victory, whereat he greatly rejoiced. So he marched with his army, and after advancing for 20 days they arrived at the great plain where Nayan lay with all his host, amounting to some 400,000 horse. Now the great Kaan's forces arrived so fast and so suddenly that the others knew nothing of the matter. For the Kaan had caused such strict watch to be made in every direction for scouts that every one that appeared was instantly captured. Thus Nayan had no warning of his coming and was completely taken by surprise, insomuch that when the great Kaan's army came up, he was asleep in the arms of a wife of his, of whom he was extravagantly fond. So thus you see why it was that the Emperor equipped his force with such speed and secrecy. Chapter 4. Of the battle that the great Kaan fought with Nayan. What shall I say about it? When day had well broken, there was the Kaan with all his host upon a hill overlooking the plain where Nayan lay in his tent, in all security, without the slightest thought of any one coming thither to do him hurt. In fact, this confidence of his was such that he kept no vedettes whether in front or in rear, for he knew nothing of the coming of the great Kaan, owing to all the approaches having been completely occupied, as I told you. Moreover, the place was in a remote wilderness, more than 30 marches from the court, though the Kaan had made the distance in 20, so eager was he to come to battle with Nayan. And what shall I tell you next? The Kaan was there on the hill, mounted on a great wooden bartizan, which was borne by 4 well-trained elephants, and over him was hoisted his standard, so high aloft that it could be seen from all sides. His troops were ordered in battles of 30,000 men apiece, and a great part of the horsemen had each a foot soldier armed with a lance set on the crupper behind him, for it was thus that the footmen were disposed of, and the whole plain seemed to be covered with his forces. So it was thus that the great Kaan's army was arrayed for battle. When Nayan and his people saw what had happened, they were sorely confounded, and rushed in haste to arms. Nevertheless they made them ready in good style, and formed their troops in an orderly manner. And when all were in battle array on both sides, as I have told you, and nothing remained but to fall to blows, then might you have heard a sound arise of many instruments of various music, and of the voices of the whole of the two hosts loudly singing. For this is a custom of the Tartars, that before they join battle they all unite in singing and playing on a certain 2-stringed instrument of theirs, a thing right pleasant to hear. And so they continue in their array of battle, singing and playing in this pleasing manner, until the great nakar of the prince is heard to sound. As soon as that begins to sound, the fight also begins on both sides, and in no case before the prince's nakar sounds dare any commence fighting. So then, as they were thus singing and playing, though ordered and ready for battle, the great nakar of the great Kaan began to sound, and that of Nayan also began to sound, and thenceforward the din of battle began to be heard loudly from this side and from that, and they rushed to work so doughtily with their bows and their maces, with their lances and swords, and with the arblasts of the footmen, that it was a wondrous sight to see. Now might you behold such flights of arrows from this side and from that the whole heaven was canopied with them, and they fell like rain. Now might you see on this side and on that full many a cavalier and man-at-arms fall slain, insomuch that the whole field seemed covered with them. From this side and from that such cries arose from the crowds of the wounded and dying, that had God thundered you would not have heard him. For fierce and furious was the battle, and quarter there was none given. But why should I make a long story of it? You must know that it was the most parlous and fierce and fearful battle that ever has been fought in our day. Nor have there ever been such forces in the field in actual fight, especially of horsemen, as were then engaged, for taking both sides there were not fewer than 760,000 horsemen, a mighty force, and that without reckoning the footmen, who were also very numerous. The battle endured with various fortune on this side and on that from morning till noon. But at last, by God's pleasure and the right that was on his side, the great Kaan had the victory, and Nayan lost the battle and was utterly routed. For the army of the great Kaan performed such feats of arms that Nayan and his host could stand against them no longer, so they turned and fled. But this availed nothing for Nayan, for he and all the barons with him were taken prisoners, and had to surrender to the Kaan with all their arms. Now you must know that Nayan was a baptized Christian, and bore the cross on his banner, but this naught availed him, seeing how grievously he had done amiss in rebelling against his lord, for he was the great Kaan's liegeman, and was bound to hold his lands of him like all his ancestors before him. End of section 33. Section 34 of The Book of Sir Marco Polo, the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Book of Sir Marco Polo, the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA, translated by Henry YULE. Book 2nd, Part 1, Chapters 5 to 7. Chapter 5. How the Great Kaan caused Nayan to be put to death. And when the Great Kaan learned that Nayan was taken, right glad was he, and commanded that he should be put to death straightway and in secret, lest endeavours should be made to obtain pity and pardon for him, because he was of the Kaan's own flesh and blood. And this was the way in which he was put to death. He was wrapped in a carpet, and tossed to and fro so mercilessly that he died. And the Kaan caused him to be put to death in this way, because he would not have the blood of his line imperial spilt upon the ground, or exposed in the eye of heaven and before the sun. And when the Great Kaan had gained this battle, as you have heard, all the barons and people of Nayan's provinces renewed their fealty to the Kaan. Now these provinces that had been under the lordship of Nayan were 4 in number, to wit, the first called Gorga, the second Cauli, the third Barskol, the fourth Sinju. Of all these 4 great provinces had Nayan been lord. It was a very great dominion. And after the Great Kaan had conquered Nayan, as you have heard, it came to pass that the different kinds of people who were present, Saracens and idolaters and Jews and many others that believed not in God, did gibe those that were Christians because of the cross that Nayan had borne on his standard, and that so grievously that there was no bearing it. Thus they would say to the Christians, "See now what precious help this God's cross of yours hath rendered Nayan, who was a Christian and a worshipper thereof." And such a din arose about the matter that it reached the Great Kaan's own ears. When it did so, he sharply rebuked those who cast these gibes at the Christians, and he also bade the Christians be of good heart, for if the cross had rendered no help to Nayan, in that it had done right well, nor could that which was good, as it was, have done otherwise, for Nayan was a disloyal and traitorous rebel against his lord, and well deserved that which had befallen him. Wherefore the cross of your God did well in that it gave him no help against the right. And this he said so loud that everybody heard him. The Christians then replied to the Great Kaan, "Great King, you say the truth indeed, for our cross can render no one help in wrongdoing, and therefore it was that it aided not Nayan, who was guilty of crime and disloyalty, for it would take no part in his evil deeds." And so thenceforward no more was heard of the floutings of the unbelievers against the Christians, for they heard very well what the sovereign said to the latter about the cross on Nayan's banner, and its giving him no help. Chapter 6. How the Great Kaan went back to the city of Cambaluc. And after the Great Kaan had defeated Nayan in the way you have heard, he went back to his capital city of Cambaluc and abode there, taking his ease and making festivity. And the other Tartar lord, called Caidu, was greatly troubled when he heard of the defeat and death of Nayan, and held himself in readiness for war. but he stood greatly in fear of being handled as Nayan had been. I told you that the great Kaan never went on a campaign but once, and it was on this occasion. In all other cases of need he sent his sons or his barons into the field. But this time he would have none go in command but himself, for he regarded the presumptuous rebellion of Nayan as far too serious and perilous an affair to be otherwise dealt with. Chapter 7. How the Kaan rewarded the valour of his captains. So we will have done with this matter of Nayan, and go on with our account of the great state of the great Kaan. We have already told you of his lineage and of his age, but now I must tell you what he did after his return, in regard to those barons who had behaved well in the battle. Him who was before captain of 100 he made captain of 1000, and him who was captain of 1000 men he made to be captain of 10,000, advancing every man according to his deserts and to his previous rank. Besides that, he also made them presents of fine silver plate and other rich appointments, gave them tablets of authority of a higher degree than they held before, and bestowed upon them fine jewels of gold and silver, and pearls and precious stones, insomuch that the amount that fell to each of them was something astonishing. And yet 'twas not so much as they had deserved, for never were men seen who did such feats of arms for the love and honour of their lord as these had done on that day of the battle. Now those tablets of authority of which I have spoken are ordered in this way. The officer who is a captain of 100 hath a tablet of silver, the captain of 1000 hath a tablet of gold or silver gilt, the commander of 10,000 hath a tablet of gold with a lion's head on it. And I will tell you the weight of the different tablets and what they denote. The tablets of the captains of 100 and 1000 weigh each of them 120 sagi, and the tablet with the lion's head engraven on it, which is that of the commander of 10,000, weighs 220 sagi. And on each of the tablets is inscribed a device which runs, "By the strength of the great God and of the great grace which he hath accorded to our Emperor, may the name of the Kaan be blessed, and let all such as will not obey him be slain and be destroyed." And I will tell you besides that all who hold these tablets likewise receive warrants in writing declaring all their powers and privileges. I should mention, too, that an officer who holds the chief command of 100,000 men, or who is general-in-chief of a great host, is entitled to a tablet that weighs 300 sagi. It has an inscription thereon to the same purport that I have told you already, and below the inscription there is the figure of a lion, and below the lion the sun and moon. They have warrants also of their high rank, command, and power. Every one, moreover, who holds a tablet of this exalted degree is entitled, whenever he goes abroad, to have a little golden canopy, such as is called an umbrella, carried on a spear over his head in token of his high command, and whenever he sits in a silver chair. To certain very great lords also there is given a tablet with gerfalcons on it. This is only to the very greatest of the Kaan's barons, and it confers on them his own full power and authority, so that if one of those chiefs wishes to send a messenger any whither, he can seize the horses of any man, be he even a king, and any other chattels at his pleasure. End of section 34. Section 35 of The Book of Sir Marco Polo, the Venetian, Concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Book of Sir Marco Polo, the Venetian, Concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA. Translated by Henry YULE. Book 2nd, Part 1, Chapters 8 to 10. Chapter 8. Concerning the person of the great Kaan. The personal appearance of the great Kaan, Lord of Lords, whose name is Kublay, is such as I shall now tell you. He is of a good stature, neither tall nor short, but of a middle height. He has a becoming amount of flesh, and is very shapely in all his limbs. His complexion is white and red, the eyes black and fine, the nose well formed and well set on. He has 4 wives, whom he retains permanently as his legitimate consorts, and the eldest of his sons by those 4 wives ought by rights to be emperor, I mean when his father dies. Those 4 ladies are called empresses, but each is distinguished also by her proper name, and each of them has a special court of her own, very grand and ample, no one of them having fewer than 300 fair and charming damsels. They have also many pages and eunuchs, and a number of other attendants of both sexes, so that each of these ladies has not less than 10,000 persons attached to her court. When the Emperor desires the society of one of these 4 consorts, he will sometimes send for the lady to his apartment, and sometimes visit her at her own. He has also a great number of concubines, and I will tell you how he obtains them. You must know that there is a tribe of Tartars called Ungrat, who are noted for their beauty. Now every year 100 of the most beautiful maidens of this tribe are sent to the great Kaan, who commits them to the charge of certain elderly ladies dwelling in his palace. And these old ladies make the girls sleep with them, in order to ascertain if they have sweet breath, and do not snore, and are sound in all their limbs. Then such of them as are of approved beauty, and are good and sound in all respects, are appointed to attend on the Emperor by turns. Thus 6 of these damsels take their turn for 3 days and nights, and wait on him when he is in his chamber, and when he is in his bed, to serve him in any way, and to be entirely at his orders. At the end of the 3 days and nights they are relieved by other 6. And so throughout the year there are reliefs of maidens by 6 and 6, changing every 3 days and nights. Chapter 9. Concerning the great Kaan's sons. The Emperor hath, by those 4 wives of his, 22 male children, the eldest of whom was called Jinkin, for the love of the good Chinghis Kaan, the first lord of the Tartars. And this Jinkin, as the eldest son of the Kaan, was to have reigned after his father's death, but as it came to pass, he died. He left a son behind him, however, whose name is Timur, and he is to be the great Kaan and Emperor after the death of his grandfather, as is but right, he being the child of the great Kaan's eldest son. And this Timur is an able and brave man, as he hath already proven on many occasions. The great Kaan hath also 25 other sons by his concubines, and these are good and valiant soldiers, and each of them is a great chief. I tell you moreover that of his children by his 4 lawful wives, there are 7 who are kings of vast realms or provinces, and govern them well, being all able and gallant men, as might be expected. For the great Kaan their sire is, I tell you, the wisest and most accomplished man, the greatest captain, the best to govern men and rule an empire, as well as the most valiant, that ever has existed among all the tribes of Tartars. Chapter 10. Concerning the palace of the great Kaan. You must know that for 3 months of the year, to wit December, January, and February, the great Kaan resides in the capital city of Cathay, which is called Cambaluc, and which is at the northeastern extremity of the country. In that city stands his great palace, and now I will tell you what it is like. It is enclosed all round by a great wall forming a square, each side of which is a mile in length, that is to say, the whole compass thereof is 4 miles. This you may depend on. It is also very thick, and a good 10 paces in height, whitewashed and loopholed all round. At each angle of the wall there is a very fine and rich palace, in which the war harness of the Emperor is kept, such as bows and quivers, saddles and bridles, and bowstrings, and everything needful for an army. Also, midway between every 2 of these corner palaces there is another of the like, so that taking the whole compass of the enclosure, you find 8 vast palaces stored with the great lord's harness of war. And you must understand that each palace is assigned to only one kind of article. Thus one is stored with bows, a second with saddles, a third with bridles, and so on in succession right round. The great wall has 5 gates on its southern face, the middle one being the great gate which is never opened on any occasion except when the great Kaan himself goes forth or enters. Close on either side of this great gate is a smaller one by which all other people pass, and then towards each angle is another great gate, also open to people in general, so that on that side there are 5 gates in all. Inside of this wall there is a second, enclosing a space that is somewhat greater in length than in breadth. This enclosure also has 8 palaces corresponding to those of the outer wall, and stored like them with the lord's harness of war. This wall also hath 5 gates on the southern face, corresponding to those in the outer wall, and hath 1 gate on each of the other faces, as the outer wall hath also. In the middle of the second enclosure is the Lord's great palace, and I will tell you what it is like. You must know that it is the greatest palace that ever was. Towards the north it is in contact with the outer wall, whilst towards the south there is a vacant space which the barons and the soldiers are constantly traversing. The palace itself hath no upper story, but is all on the ground floor. Only the basement is raised some 10 palms above the surrounding soil, and this elevation is retained by a wall of marble raised to the level of the pavement, 2 paces in width and projecting beyond the base of the palace, so as to form a kind of terrace walk, by which people can pass round the building, and which is exposed to view, whilst on the outer edge of the wall there is a very fine pillared balustrade, and up to this the people are allowed to come. The roof is very lofty, and the walls of the palace are all covered with gold and silver. They are also adorned with representations of dragons, sculptured and gilt, beasts and birds, knights and idols, and sundry other subjects, and on the ceiling too you see nothing but gold and silver and painting. On each of the 4 sides there is a great marble staircase leading to the top of the marble wall, and forming the approach to the palace. The hall of the palace is so large that it could easily dine 6,000 people, and it is quite a marvel to see how many rooms there are besides. The building is altogether so vast, so rich, and so beautiful, that no man on earth could design anything superior to it. The outside of the roof also is all coloured with vermilion, and yellow, and green, and blue, and other hues, which are fixed with a varnish so fine and exquisite, that they shine like crystal, and lend a resplendent lustre to the palace as seen for a great way around. This roof is made too with such strength and solidity, that it is fit to last for ever. On the interior side of the palace are large buildings with halls and chambers, where the Emperor's private property is placed, such as his treasures of gold, silver, gems, pearls, and gold plate, and in which reside the ladies and concubines. There he occupies himself at his own convenience, and no one else has access. Between the 2 walls of the enclosure which I have described, there are fine parks and beautiful trees bearing a variety of fruits. There are beasts also of sundry kinds, such as white stags and fallow deer, gazelles and roebucks, and fine squirrels of various sorts, with numbers also of the animal that gives the musk, and all manner of other beautiful creatures, insomuch that the whole place is full of them, and no spot remains void except where there is traffic of people going and coming. The parks are covered with abundant grass, and the roads through them being all paved and raised 2 cubits above the surface, they never become muddy, nor does the rain lodge on them, but flows off into the meadows, quickening the soil and producing that abundance of herbage. From that corner of the enclosure which is towards the northwest there extends a fine lake, containing foison of fish of different kinds, which the Emperor hath caused to be put in there, so that whenever he desires any he can have them at his pleasure. A river enters this lake and issues from it, but there is a grating of iron or brass put up, so that the fish cannot escape in that way. Moreover, on the north side of the palace, about a bow-shot off, there is a hill which has been made by art, from the earth dug out of the lake. It is a good 100 paces in height, and a mile in compass. This hill is entirely covered with trees that never lose their leaves but remain ever green. And I assure you that wherever a beautiful tree may exist, and the Emperor gets news of it, he sends for it and has it transported bodily with all its roots and the earth attached to them, and planted on that hill of his. No matter how big the tree may be, he gets it carried by his elephants, and in this way he has got together the most beautiful collection of trees in all the world. And he has also caused the whole hill to be covered with the ore of azure, which is very green. And thus not only are the trees all green, but the hill itself is all green likewise, and there is nothing to be seen on it that is not green, and hence it is called the Green Mount, and in good sooth 'tis named well. On the top of the hill again there is a fine big palace which is all green inside and out, and thus the hill and the trees and the palace form together a charming spectacle, and it is marvellous to see their uniformity of colour. Everybody who sees them is delighted, and the great Kaan had caused this beautiful prospect to be formed for the comfort and solace and delectation of his heart. You must know that beside the palace that we have been describing, that is, the great palace, the Emperor has caused another to be built just like his own in every respect, and this he hath done for his son, when he shall reign and be Emperor after him. Hence it is made just in the same fashion and of the same size, so that everything can be carried on in the same manner after his own death. It stands on the other side of the lake from the great Kaan's palace, and there is a bridge crossing the water from one to the other. The prince in question holds now a seal of empire, but not with such complete authority as the great Kaan, who remains supreme as long as he lives. Now I am going to tell you of the chief city of Cathay, in which these palaces stand, and why it was built, and how. End of section 35. Section 36 of the Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA. Translated by Henry YULE. Book the Second, Part 1, Chapters 11 to 14. Chapter 11, concerning the city of Cambaluc. Now there was on that spot in old times a great and noble city called Cambaluc, which is as much as to say in our tongue, the city of the Emperor. But the great Kaan was informed by his astrologers that this city would prove rebellious, and raise great disorders against his imperial authority. So he caused the present city to be built close beside the old one, with only a river between them. And he caused the people of the old city to be removed to the new town that he had founded, and this is called Taidu. However, he allowed a portion of the people, which he did not suspect, to remain in the old city, because the new one could not hold the whole of them, big as it is. As regards the size of this new city, you must know that it has a compass of 24 miles, for each side of it hath a length of 6 miles, and it is 4 square. And it is all walled around with walls of earth, which have a thickness of full 10 paces at the bottom, and a height of more than 10 paces. But they are not so thick at the top, for they diminish in thickness as they rise, so that at top they are only about 3 paces thick. And they are provided throughout with loopholed battlements, which are all whitewashed. There are 12 gates, and over each gate there is a great and handsome palace, so that there are on each side of the square 3 gates and 5 palaces. For, I ought to mention, there is at each angle also a great and handsome palace. In those palaces are vast halls, in which are kept the arms of the city garrison. The streets are so straight and wide that you can see right along them from end to end, and from one gate to the other. And up and down the city there are beautiful palaces, and many great and fine hostelries, and fine houses in great numbers. All the plots of ground on which the houses of the city are built are 4 square, and laid out with straight lines, all the plots being occupied by great and spacious palaces, with courts and gardens of proportionate size. All these plots were assigned to different heads of families. Each square plot is encompassed by handsome streets for traffic, and thus the whole city is arranged in squares just like a chessboard, and disposed in a manner so perfect and masterly that it is impossible to give a description that should do it justice. Moreover, in the middle of the city there is a great clock, that is to say, a bell, which is struck at night, and after it has struck 3 times, no one must go out in the city, unless it be for the needs of a woman in labour or of the sick, and those who go about on such errands are bound to carry lanterns with them. Moreover, the established guard at each gate of the city is 1,000 armed men. Not that you are to imagine this guard is kept up for fear of any attack, but only as a guard of honour for the sovereign, who resides there, and to prevent thieves from doing mischief in the town. Chapter 12. How the Great Kaan maintains a guard of 12,000 horse, which are called Kashikhan. You must know that the Great Kaan, to maintain his state, hath a guard of 12,000 horsemen, who are styled Kashikhan, which is as much as to say, knights devoted to their lord. Not that he keeps these for fear of any man whatever, but merely because of his own exalted dignity. These 12,000 men have 4 captains, each of whom is in command of 3,000, and each body of 3,000 takes a turn of 3 days and nights to guard the palace, where they also take their meals. After the expiration of 3 days and nights, they are relieved by another 3,000, who mount guard for the same space of time, and then another body takes its turn, so that there are always 3,000 on guard. Thus it goes until the whole 12,000, who are styled, as I said, Kashikhan, have been on duty, and then the tour begins again, and so runs on from year's end to year's end. Chapter 13. The fashion of the Great Kaan's table at his high feasts. And when the Great Kaan sits at table on any great court occasion, it is in this fashion. His table is elevated a good deal above the others, and he sits at the north end of the hall, looking towards the south, with his chief wife beside him on the left. On his right sit his sons and his nephews, and other kinsmen of the blood imperial, but lower, so that their heads are on a level with the Emperor's feet. And then the other barons sit at other tables lower still. So also with the women, for all the wives of the lord's sons and of his nephews and other kinsmen sit at the lower table to his right, and below them again the ladies of the other barons and knights, each in the place assigned by the lord's orders. The tables are so disposed that the Emperor can see the whole of them from end to end, many as they are. Further, you are not to suppose that everybody sits at table. On the contrary, the greater part of the soldiers and their officers sit at their meal in the hall on the carpets. Outside the hall will be found more than 40,000 people, for there is a great concourse of folk bringing presents to the Lord, or come from foreign countries with curiosities. In a certain part of the hall near where the Great Kaan holds his table, there is set a large and very beautiful piece of workmanship in the form of a square coffer or buffet, about 3 paces each way, exquisitely wrought with figures of animals, finely carved and gilt. The middle is hollow, and in it stands a great vessel of pure gold, holding as much as an ordinary butt, and at each corner of the great vessel is one of smaller size, of the capacity of a firkin, and from the former the wine or beverage flavoured with fine and costly spices is drawn off into the latter. And on the buffet aforesaid are set all the Lord's drinking vessels, among which are certain pitchers of the finest gold, which are called verniques, and are big enough to hold drink for 8 or 10 persons. And one of these is put between every 2 persons, besides a couple of golden cups with handles, so that every man helps himself from the pitcher that stands between him and his neighbour. And the ladies are supplied in the same way. The value of these pitchers and cups is something immense. In fact, the Great Kaan has such a quantity of this kind of plate, and of gold and silver in other shapes, as no one ever before saw or heard tell of, or could believe. There are certain barons specially deputed to see that foreigners, who do not know the customs of the court, are provided with places suited to their rank, and these barons are continually moving to and fro in the hall, looking to the wants of the guests at table, and causing the servants to supply them promptly with wine, milk, meat, or whatever they lack. At every door of the hall, or indeed wherever the Emperor may be, there stand a couple of big men like giants, one on each side, armed with staves. Their business is to see that no one steps upon the threshold in entering, and if this does happen, they strip the offender of his clothes, and he must pay a forfeit to have them back again. Or in lieu of taking his clothes, they give him a certain number of blows. If they are foreigners ignorant of the order, then there are barons appointed to introduce them and explain it to them. They think, in fact, that it brings bad luck if anyone touches the threshold. Howbeit they are not expected to stick at this in going forth again, for at that time some are like to be the worse for liquor and incapable of looking to their steps. And you must know that those who wait upon the great Kaan with his dishes and his drink are some of the great barons. They have the mouth and nose muffled with fine napkins of silk and gold, so that no breath nor odour from their persons should taint the dish or the goblet presented to the lord. And when the Emperor is going to drink, all the musical instruments, of which he has vast store of every kind, begin to play. And when he takes the cup, all the barons and the rest of the company drop on their knees and make the deepest obeisance before him, and then the Emperor doth drink. But each time that he does so, the whole ceremony is repeated. I will say naught about the dishes, as you may easily conceive that there is a great plenty of every possible kind. But you should know that in every case where a baron or knight dines at those tables, their wives also dine there with the other ladies. And when all have dined and the tables have been removed, then come in a great number of players and jugglers, adepts at all sorts of wonderful feats, and perform before the Emperor and the rest of the company, creating great diversion and mirth, so that everybody is full of laughter and enjoyment. And when the performance is over, the company breaks up, and every one goes into his quarters. Chapter 14. Concerning the great feast held by the Grand Kaan every year on his birthday. You must know that the Tartars keep high festival yearly on their birthdays, and the great Kaan was born on the 28th day of the September moon, so on that day is held the greatest feast of the year at the Kaan's court, always excepting that which he holds on New Year's Day, of which I shall tell you afterwards. Now on his birthday the great Kaan dresses in the best of his robes, all wrought with beaten gold, and full 12,000 barons and knights on that day come forth, dressed in robes of the same colour, and precisely like those of the great Kaan, except that they are not so costly, but still they are all of the same colour as his, and are also of silk and gold. Every man so clothed has also a girdle of gold, and this as well as the dress is given him by the sovereign, and I will aver that there are some of these suits decked with so many pearls and precious stones that a single suit shall be worth full 10,000 golden bezants. And of such raiment there are several sets. For you must know that the great Kaan 13 times in the year presents to his barons and knights such suits of raiment as I am speaking of, and on each occasion they wear the same colour that he does, a different colour being assigned to each festival. Hence you may see what a huge business it is, and that there is no prince in the world but he alone who could keep up such customs as these. On his birthday also all the Tartars in the world, and all the countries and governments that owe allegiance to the Kaan, offer him great presents according to their several ability, and as prescription or orders have fixed the amount. And many other persons also come with great presents to the Kaan, in order to beg for some employment from him. And the great Kaan has chosen 12 barons on whom is laid the charge of assigning to each of these supplicants a suitable answer. On this day likewise all the idolaters, all the Saracens, and all the Christians, and other descriptions of people, make great and solemn devotions, with much chanting and lighting of lamps, and burning of incense, each to the God whom he doth worship, praying that he would save the Emperor, and grant him long life and health and happiness. And thus, as I have related, is celebrated the joyous feast of the Kaan's birthday. Now I will tell you of another festival which the Kaan holds at the New Year, and which is called the White Feast. End of section 36. Section 37 of The Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, Concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, Concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA. Translated by Henry YULE. Book 2nd, Part 1, Chapters 15 to 18. Chapter 15. Of the great festival which the Kaan holds on New Year's Day. The beginning of their new year is the month of February, and on that occasion the great Kaan and all his subjects made such a feast as I now shall describe. It is the custom that on this occasion the Kaan and all his subjects should be clothed entirely in white. So, that day, everybody is in white, men and women, great and small. And this is done in order that they may thrive all through the year, for they deem that white clothing is lucky. On that day also all the people of all the provinces and governments and kingdoms and countries that own allegiance to the Kaan bring him great presents of gold and silver, and pearls and gems, and rich textures of divers kinds. And this they do that the Emperor throughout the year may have abundance of treasure and enjoyment without care. And the people also make presents to each other of white things, and embrace and kiss and make merry, and wish each other happiness and good luck for the coming year. On that day, I can assure you, among the customary presents there shall be offered to the Kaan from various quarters more than 100,000 white horses, beautiful animals and richly caparisoned. And you must know 'tis their custom in offering presents to the great Kaan, at least when the province making the present is able to do so, to present 9 times 9 articles. For instance, if a province sends horses, it sends 9 times 9, or 81 horses. Of gold, 9 times 9 pieces of gold, and so with stuffs or whatever else the present may consist of. On that day also, the whole of the Kaan's elephants, amounting fully to 5,000 in number, are exhibited, all covered with rich and gay housings of inlaid cloth representing beasts and birds, whilst each of them carries on his back 2 splendid coffers, all of these being filled with the Emperor's plate and other costly furniture required for the court on the occasion of the white feast. And these are followed by a vast number of camels, which are likewise covered with rich housings and laden with things needful for the feast. All these are paraded before the Emperor, and it makes the finest sight in the world. Moreover, on the morning of the feast, before the tables are set, all the kings and all the dukes, marquises, counts, barons, knights and astrologers, and philosophers, and leeches, and falconers, and other officials of sundry kinds, from all the places round about, present themselves in the great hall before the Emperor, whilst those who can find no room to enter stand outside in such a position that the Emperor can see them all well. And the whole company is marshalled in this wise. First are the Kaan's sons and his nephews, and the other princes of the blood imperial. Next to them all kings, then dukes, and then all others in succession according to the degree of each. And when they are all seated, each in his proper place, then a great prelate rises and says with a loud voice, "Bow and adore." And as soon as he has said this, the company bow down until their foreheads touch the earth in adoration towards the Emperor as if he were a god. And this adoration they repeat 4 times, and then go to a highly decorated altar, on which is a vermilion tablet with the name of the Grand Kaan inscribed thereon, and a beautiful censer of gold. So they incense the tablet and the altar with great reverence, and then return each man to his seat. When all have performed this, then the presents are offered, of which I have spoken as being so rich and costly, and after all have been offered and been seen by the Emperor, the tables are set, and all take their places at them with perfect order, as I have already told you. And after dinner the jugglers come in and amuse the court, as you have heard before, and when that is over, every man goes to his quarters. Chapter 16. concerning the 12,000 barons who receive robes of cloth of gold from the Emperor on the great festivals, 13 changes apiece. Now you must know that the great Kaan hath set apart 12,000 of his men who are distinguished by the name of Keshikan, as I have told you before, and on each of these 12,000 barons he bestows 13 changes of raiment, which are all different from one another. I mean that in one set the 12,000 are all of one colour, the next 12,000 of another colour, and so on, so that they are of 13 different colours. These robes are garnished with gems and pearls and other precious things in a very rich and costly manner. And along with each of these changes of raiment, that is, 13 times in the year, he bestows on each of those 12,000 barons a fine golden girdle of great richness and value, and likewise a pair of boots of kamut, that is to say, of borgal, curiously wrought with silvered thread, insomuch that when they are clothed in these dresses, every man of them looks like a king. And there is an established order as to which dress is to be worn at each of those 13 feasts. The Emperor himself also has his 13 suits corresponding to those of his barons, in colour I mean, though his are grander, richer, and costlier, so that he is always arrayed in the same colour as his barons, who are, as it were, his comrades. And you may see that all this costs an amount which it is scarcely possible to calculate. Now I have told you of the 13 changes of raiment received from the prince by those 12,000 barons, amounting in all to 156,000 suits of so great cost and value, to say nothing of the girdles and the boots, which are also worth a great sum of money. All this the great Lord hath ordered, that he may attach the more of grandeur and dignity to his festivals. And now I must mention another thing that I had forgotten, but which you will be astonished to learn from this book. You must know that on the feast day a great lion is led to the Emperor's presence, and as soon as it sees him it lies down before him with every sign of the greatest veneration, as if it acknowledged him for its lord, and it remains there lying before him, and entirely unchained. Truly this must seem a strange story to those who have not seen the thing. Chapter 17. How the great Kaan enjoineth his people to supply him with game. The 3 months of December, January, and February, during which the Emperor resides at his capital city, are assigned for hunting and fowling to the extent of some 40 days' journey round the city, and it is ordained that the larger game taken be sent to the court. To be more particular, of all the larger beasts of the chase, such as boars, roebucks, bucks, stags, lions, bears, etc., the greater part of what is taken has to be sent, and feathered game likewise. The animals are gutted and dispatched to the court on carts. This is done by all the people within 20 or 30 days' journey, and the quantity so dispatched is immense. Those at a greater distance cannot send the game, but they have to send the skins after tanning them, and these are employed in the making of equipments for the Emperor's army. Chapter 18. Of the lions and leopards and wolves that the Kaan keeps for the chase. The Emperor hath numbers of leopards trained to the chase, and hath also a great many lynxes taught in like manner to catch game, and which afford excellent sport. He hath also several great lions, bigger than those of Babylonia, beasts whose skins are coloured in the most beautiful way, being striped all along the sides with black, red, and white. These are trained to catch boars and wild cattle, bears, wild asses, stags, and other great or fierce beasts. And 'tis a rare sight, I can tell you, to see those lions giving chase to such beasts as I have mentioned. When they are to be so employed, the lions are taken out in a covered cart, and every lion has a little doggy with him. They are obliged to approach the game against the wind, otherwise the animals would scent the approach of the lion and be off. There are also a great number of eagles, all broken to catch wolves, foxes, deer, and wild goats, and they do catch them in great numbers. But those especially that are trained to wolf catching are very large and powerful birds, and no wolf is able to get away from them. End of section 37. Section 38 of the Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA. Translated by Henry YULE. Book 2nd, Part 1, Chapters 19 to 22. Chapter 19. Concerning the two brothers who have charge of the Kaan's hounds. The Emperor hath two barons who are own brothers, one called Bayan and the other Mingan, and these are styled Shinushi or Kunishi, which is as much as to say, the keepers of the mastiff dogs. Each of these brothers hath 10,000 men under his orders, each body of 10,000 being dressed alike, the one in red and the other in blue, and whenever they accompany the lord to the chase, they wear this livery in order to be recognized. Out of each body of 10,000 there are 2,000 men who are each in charge of one or more great mastiffs, so that the whole number of these is very large. And when the prince goes a-hunting, one of those barons, with his 10,000 men and something like 5,000 dogs, goes towards the right, whilst the other goes towards the left with his party in like manner. They move along, all abreast of one another, so that the whole line extends over a full day's journey, and no animal can escape them. Truly, it is a glorious sight to see the working of the dogs and the huntsmen on such an occasion. And as the lord rides a-fowling across the plains, you will see these big hounds come tearing up, one peck after a bear, another peck after a stag, or some other beast, as it may hap, and running the game down, now on this side and now on that, so that it is really a most delightful sport and spectacle. The two brothers I have mentioned are bound by the tenure of their office to supply the Kaan's court from October to the end of March with 1,000 head of game daily, whether of beasts or birds, and not counting quails, and also with fish to the best of their ability, allowing fish enough for 3 persons to reckon as equal to 1 head of game. Now I have told you of the masters of the hounds and all about them, and next will I tell you how the lord goes off on an expedition for the space of 3 months. Chapter 20. How the Emperor goes on a hunting expedition. After he has stopped at his capital city those 3 months that I mentioned, to wit, December, January, February, he starts off on the 1st day of March and travels southward towards the ocean sea, a journey of 2 days. He takes with him full 10,000 falconers and some 500 gerfalcons, besides peregrines, sakers, and other hawks in great numbers, and goshawks also to fly at the waterfowl. But do not suppose that he keeps all these together by him. They are distributed about, hither and thither, 100 together, or 200 at the utmost, as he thinks proper. But they are always fowling as they advance, and the most part of the quarry taken is carried to the Emperor. And let me tell you, when he goes thus a-fowling with his gerfalcons and other hawks, he is attended by full 10,000 men, who are disposed in couples, and these are called toscaol, which is as much as to say watchers, and the name describes their business. They are posted from spot to spot, always in couples, and thus they cover a great deal of ground. Every man of them is provided with a whistle and hood, so as to be able to call in a hawk and hold it in hand. And when the Emperor makes a cast, there is no need that he follow it up, for those men I speak of keep so good a lookout that they never lose sight of the birds, and if these have need of help, they are ready to render it. All the Emperor's hawks, and those of the barons as well, have a little label attached to the leg to mark them, on which is written the names of the owner and the keeper of the bird, and in this way the hawk, when caught, is at once identified and handed over to its owner. But if not, the bird is carried to a certain baron, who is styled the Bularguchi, which is as much as to say the keeper of lost property. And I tell you that whatever may be found without a known owner, whether it be a horse, or a sword, or a hawk, or what not, it is carried to that baron straightway, and he takes charge of it. And if the finder neglects to carry his trover to the baron, the latter punishes him. Likewise the loser of any article goes to the baron, and if the thing be in his hands, it is immediately given up to the owner. Moreover, the said baron always pitches on the highest spot of the camp, with his banner displayed, in order that those who have lost or found anything may have no difficulty in finding their way to him. Thus nothing can be lost but it shall be incontinently found and restored. And so the emperor follows this road that I have mentioned, leading along in the vicinity of the ocean sea, which is within 2 days' journey of his capital city, Cambaluc. And as he goes there is many a fine sight to be seen, and plenty of the very best entertainment in hawking. In fact, there is no sport in the world to equal it. The emperor himself is carried upon 4 elephants in a fine chamber made of timber, lined inside with plates of beaten gold, and outside with lions' skins, for he always travels in this way on his fowling expeditions, because he is troubled with gout. He always keeps beside him a dozen of his choicest gerfalcons, and is attended by several of his barons, who ride on horseback alongside. And sometimes, as they may be going along, and the emperor from his chamber is holding discourse with the barons, one of the latter shall exclaim, "Sire, look out for cranes!" Then the emperor instantly has the top of his chamber thrown open, and having marked the cranes, he casts one of his gerfalcons, whichever he pleases, and often the quarry is struck within his view, so that he has the most exquisite sport and diversion, there as he sits in his chamber or lies on his bed, and all the barons with him get the enjoyment of it likewise. So it is not without reason I tell you that I do not believe there ever existed in the world, or ever will exist, a man with such sport and enjoyment as he has, or with such rare opportunities. And when he has travelled till he reaches a place called Kashamodun, there he finds his tents pitched, with the tents of his sons and his barons, and those of his ladies and theirs, so that there shall be full 10,000 tents in all, and all fine and rich ones. And I will tell you how his own quarters are disposed. The tent in which he holds his courts is large enough to give cover easily to 1,000 souls. It is pitched with its door to the south, and the barons and knights remain in waiting in it, whilst the lord abides in another close to it on the west side. When he wishes to speak with any one, he causes the person to be summoned to that other tent. Immediately behind the great tent there is a fine large chamber where the lord sleeps, and there are also many other tents and chambers, but they are not in contact with the great tent as these are. The 2 audience tents and the sleeping chamber are constructed in this way. Each of the audience tents has 3 poles, which are of spicewood, and are most artfully covered with lions' skins, striped with black and white and red, so that they do not suffer from any weather. All 3 apartments are also covered outside with similar skins of striped lions, a substance that lasts forever. And inside they are all lined with ermine and sable, these 2 being the finest and most costly furs in existence. For a robe of sable large enough to line a mantle is worth 2,000 bezants of gold, or 1,000 at least, and this kind of skin is called by the Tartars the king of furs. The beast itself is about the size of a marten. These 2 furs of which I speak are applied and inlaid so exquisitely that it is really something worth seeing. All the tent ropes are of silk. And in short, I may say that those tents, to wit the 2 audience halls and the sleeping chamber, are so costly that it is not every king could pay for them. Round about these tents are others, also fine ones and beautifully pitched, in which are the emperor's ladies and the ladies of the other princes and officers. And then there are the tents for the hawks and their keepers, so that altogether the number of tents there on the plain is something wonderful. To see the many people that are thronging to and fro on every side and every day there, you would take the camp for a good big city, for you must reckon the leeches and the astrologers and the falconers and all the other attendants on so great a company, and add that everybody there has his whole family with him, for such is their custom. The lord remains encamped there until the spring, and all that time he does nothing but go hawking round about among the canebrakes along the lakes and rivers that abound in that region, and across fine plains on which are plenty of cranes and swans, and all sorts of other fowl. The other gentry of the camp also are never done with hunting and hawking, and every day they bring home great store of venison and feathered game of all sorts. Indeed, without having witnessed it, you would never believe what quantities of game are taken, and what marvellous sport and diversion they all have whilst they are encamped there. There is another thing I should mention, to wit, that for 20 days' journey round the spot nobody is allowed, be he who he may, to keep hawks or hounds, though anywhere else whosoever list may keep them. And furthermore, throughout all the Emperor's territories, nobody, however audacious, dares to hunt any of these 4 animals, to wit, hare, stag, buck, and roe, from the month of March to the month of October. Anybody who should do so would rue it bitterly. But those people are so obedient to their lord's command that even if a man were to find one of those animals asleep by the roadside, he would not touch it for the world. And thus the game multiplies at such a rate that the whole country swarms with it, and the Emperor gets as much as he could desire. Beyond the term I have mentioned, however, to wit, that from March to October, everybody may take these animals as he list. After the Emperor has tarried in that place, enjoying his sport as I have related, from March to the middle of May, he moves with all his people, and returns straight to his capital city of Cambaluc, which is also the capital of Cathay, as you have been told, but all the while continuing to take his diversion in hunting and hawking as he goes along. Chapter 21. Rehearsal of the way the year of the great Kaan is distributed. On arriving at his capital of Cambaluc, he stays in his palace there 3 days and no more, during which time he has great court entertainments and rejoicings, and makes merry with his wives. He then quits his palace at Cambaluc, and proceeds to that city which he has built, as I told you before, and which is called Chandu, where he has that grand park and palace of cane, and where he keeps his gerfalcons in mew. There he spends the summer, to escape the heat, for the situation is a very cool one. After stopping there from the beginning of May to the 28th of August, he takes his departure. That is the time when they sprinkle the white mare's milk, as I told you, and returns to his capital Cambaluc. There he stops, as I've told you also, the month of September, to keep his birthday feast, and also throughout October, November, December, January, and February, in which last month he keeps the grand feast of the New Year, which they call the White Feast, as you've heard already, with all particulars. He then sets out on his march towards the ocean sea, hunting and hawking, and continues out from the beginning of March to the middle of May, and then comes back for 3 days only to the capital, during which he makes merry with his wives and holds a great court and grand entertainments. In truth, 'tis something astonishing, the magnificence displayed by the Emperor in those 3 days, and then he starts off again, as you know. Thus his whole year is distributed in the following manner: 6 months at his chief palace in the royal city of Cambaluc, to wit, September, October, November, December, January, February. Then on the great hunting expedition towards the sea, March, April, May. Then back to his palace at Cambaluc for 3 days. Then off to the city of Chandu, which he has built, and where the Cane Palace is, where he stays June, July, August. Then back again to his capital city of Cambaluc. So thus the whole year is spent, 6 months at the capital, 3 months in hunting, and 3 months at the Cane Palace to avoid the heat. And in this way he passes his time with the greatest enjoyment, not to mention occasional journeys in this or that direction at his own pleasure. Chapter 22. Concerning the city of Cambaluc and its great traffic and population. You must know that the city of Cambaluc hath such a multitude of houses, and such a vast population, inside the walls and outside, that it seems quite past all possibility. There is a suburb outside each of the gates, which are 12 in number, and these suburbs are so great that they contain more people than the city itself. For the suburb of one gate spreads in width till it meets the suburb of the next, whilst they extend in length some 3 or 4 miles. In those suburbs lodge the foreign merchants and travellers, of whom there are always great numbers who have come to bring presents to the Emperor, or to sell articles at court, or because the city affords so good a mart to attract traders. There are in each of the suburbs, to a distance of a mile from the city, numerous fine hostelries, for the lodgment of merchants from different parts of the world, and a special hostelry is assigned to each description of people, as if we should say there is one for the Lombards, another for the Germans, and a third for the Frenchmen. And thus there are as many good houses outside of the city as inside, without counting those that belong to the great lords and barons, which are very numerous. You must know that it is forbidden to bury any dead body inside the city. If the body be that of an idolater, it is carried out beyond the city and suburbs to a remote place assigned for the purpose, to be burnt. And if it be of one belonging to a religion the custom of which is to bury, such as the Christian, the Saracen, or what not, it is also carried out beyond the suburbs to a distant place assigned for the purpose. And thus the city is preserved in a better and more healthy state. Moreover, no public woman resides inside the city, but all such abide outside in the suburbs. And 'tis wonderful what a vast number of these there are for the foreigners. It is a certain fact that there are more than 20,000 of them living by prostitution. And that so many can live in this way will show you how vast is the population. Guards patrol the city every night in parties of 30 or 40, looking out for any persons who may be abroad at unseasonable hours, that is, after the great bell hath stricken thrice. If they find any such person, he is immediately taken to prison, and examined next morning by the proper officers. If these find him guilty of any misdemeanour, they order him a proportionate beating with the stick. Under this punishment people sometimes die, but they adopt it in order to eschew bloodshed, for their Baksis say that it is an evil thing to shed men's blood. To this city also are brought articles of greater cost and rarity, and in greater abundance of all kinds than to any other city in the world. For people of every description and from every region bring things, including all the costly wares of India, as well as the fine and precious goods of Cathay itself with its provinces, some for the sovereign, some for the court, some for the city which is so great, some for the crowds of barons and knights, some for the great hosts of the emperor which are quartered round about, and thus between court and city the quantity brought in is endless. As a sample, I tell you, no day in the year passes that there do not enter the city 1,000 cartloads of silk alone, from which are made quantities of cloth of silk and gold and of other goods. And this is not to be wondered at, for in all the countries round about there is no flax, so that everything has to be made of silk. It is true indeed that in some parts of the country there is cotton and hemp, but not sufficient for their wants. This, however, is not of much consequence, because silk is so abundant and cheap, and is a more valuable substance than either flax or cotton. Round about this great city of Cambaluc there are some 200 other cities at various distances, from which traders come to sell their goods and buy others for their lords, and all find means to make their sales and purchases, so that the traffic of the city is passing great. End of section 38.
Section 39 of the Book of Sir Marco Polo, the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lynne Thompson. The Book of Sir Marco Polo, the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA. Translated by Henry YULE. Book Second, Part 1. Chapter 23, concerning the oppressions of Achmath Bailo, and the plot that was formed against him. You will hear further on how that there are 12 persons appointed who have authority to dispose of lands, offices, and everything else at their discretion. Now one of these was a certain Saracen named Achmath, a shrewd and able man, who had more power and influence with the Grand Kaan than any of the others, and the Kaan held him in such regard that he could do what he pleased. The fact was as came out after his death, that Achmath had so wrought upon the Kaan with his sorcery that the latter had the greatest faith and reliance on everything he said, and in this way did everything that Achmath wished him to do. This person disposed of all governments and offices, and passed sentence on all malefactors. And whenever he desired to have any one whom he hated put to death, whether with justice or without it, he would go to the Emperor and say, "Such an one deserves death, for he hath done this or that against your imperial dignity." Then the Lord would say, "Do as you think right," and so he would have the man forthwith executed. Thus when people saw how unbounded were his powers, and how unbounded the reliance placed by the Emperor on everything that he said, they did not venture to oppose him in anything. No one was so high in rank or power as to be free from the dread of him. If any one was accused by him to the Emperor of a capital offence, and desired to defend himself, he was unable to bring proofs in his own exculpation, for no one would stand by him, and no one dared to oppose Achmath. And thus the latter caused many to perish unjustly. Moreover, there was no beautiful woman whom he might desire but he got hold of her, and if she were unmarried, forcing her to be his wife, if otherwise, compelling her to consent to his desires. Whenever he knew of any one who had a pretty daughter, certain ruffians of his would go to the father and say, "What say you? Here is this pretty daughter of yours. Give her in marriage to the Bailo Achmath," for they called him the Bailo, or, as we should say, the vice-regent, "and we will arrange for his giving you such a government or such an office for 3 years." And so the man would surrender his daughter, and Achmath would go to the Emperor and say, "Such a government is vacant, or will be vacant on such a day. So and so is a proper man for the post." And the Emperor would reply, "Do as you think best," and the father of the girl was immediately appointed to the government. Thus, either through the ambition of the parents, or through fear of the minister, all the beautiful women were at his beck, either as wives or mistresses. Also he had some 25 sons who held offices of importance, and some of these, under the protection of their father's name, committed scandals like his own, and many other abominable iniquities. This Achmath also had amassed great treasure, for everybody who wanted office sent him a heavy bribe. In such authority did this man continue for 22 years. At last the people of the country, to wit the Cathayans, utterly wearied with the endless outrages and abominable iniquities which he perpetrated against them, whether as regarded their wives or their own persons, conspired to slay him and revolt against the government. Amongst the rest there was a certain Cathayan named Chandu, a commander of 1,000, whose mother, daughter, and wife had all been dishonoured by Achmath. Now this man, full of bitter resentment, entered into parley regarding the destruction of the minister with another Cathayan whose name was Vanchu, who was a commander of 10,000. They came to the conclusion that the time to do the business would be during the great Kaan's absence from Cambaluc. For after stopping there 3 months, he used to go to Chandu and stop there 3 months, and at the same time his son Chinkin used to go away to his usual haunts, and this Achmath remained in charge of the city, sending to obtain the Kaan's orders from Chandu when any emergency arose. So Vanchu and Chenchu, having come to this conclusion, proceeded to communicate it to the chief people among the Cathayans, and then by common consent sent word to their friends in many other cities that they had determined on such a day, at the signal given by a beacon, to massacre all the men with beards, and that the other cities should stand ready to do the like on seeing the signal fires. The reason why they spoke of massacring the bearded men was that the Cathayans naturally have no beard, whilst beards are worn by the Tartars, Saracens, and Christians. And you should know that all the Cathayans detested the Grand Kaan's rule, because he set over them governors who were Tartars, or still more frequently Saracens, and these they could not endure, for they were treated by them just like slaves. You see, the great Kaan had not succeeded to the dominion of Cathay by hereditary right, but held it by conquest, and thus having no confidence in the natives, he put all authority into the hands of Tartars, Saracens, or Christians, who were attached to his household and devoted to his service, and were foreigners in Cathay. Wherefore, on the day appointed, the aforesaid Vanchu and Chenchu having entered the palace at night, Vanchu sat down and caused a number of lights to be kindled before him, and then sent a messenger to Achmath Bailo, who lived in the old city, as if to summon him to the presence of Chinkin, the great Kaan's son, who, it was pretended, had arrived unexpectedly. When Achmath heard this, he was much surprised, but made haste to go, for he feared the prince greatly. When he arrived at the gate he met a Tartar called Cogatai, who was captain of the 12,000 that formed the standing garrison of the city, and the latter asked him whither he was bound so late. "To Chinkin, who has just arrived." Quoth Cogatai, "How can that be? How could he come so privily that I know naught of it?" So he followed the minister with a certain number of his soldiers. Now the notion of the Cathayans was that, if they could make an end of Achmath, they would have naught else to be afraid of. So as soon as Achmath got inside the palace and saw all that illumination, he bowed down before Vanchu, supposing him to be Chinkin, and Chenchu, who was standing ready with a sword, straightway cut his head off. As soon as Cogatai, who had halted at the entrance, beheld this, he shouted, "Treason!" and instantly discharged an arrow at Vanchu, and shot him dead as he sat. At the same time he called his people to seize Chenchu, and sent a proclamation through the city that any one found in the streets would be instantly put to death. The Cathayans saw that the Tartars had discovered the plot, and that they had no longer any leader, since Vanchu was killed and Chenchu was taken. So they kept still in their houses, and were unable to pass the signal for the rising of the other cities, as had been settled. Cogatai immediately dispatched messengers to the great Kaan, giving an orderly report of the whole affair, and the Kaan sent back orders for him to make a careful investigation, and to punish the guilty as their misdeeds deserved. In the morning Cogatai examined all the Cathayans, and put to death a number whom he found to be ringleaders in the plot. The same thing was done in the other cities, when it was found that the plot extended to them also. After the great Kaan had returned to Cambaluc, he was very anxious to discover what had led to this affair, and he then learned all about the endless iniquities of that accursed Achmath and his sons. It was proved that he and 7 of his sons, for they were not all bad, had forced no end of women to be their wives, besides those whom they had ravished. The great Kaan then ordered all the treasure that Achmath had accumulated in the old city to be transferred to his own treasury in the new city, and it was found to be of enormous amount. He also ordered the body of Achmath to be dug up and cast into the streets for the dogs to tear, and commanded those of his sons that had followed the father's evil example to be flayed alive. These circumstances called the Kaan's attention to the accursed doctrines of the sect of the Saracens, which excuse every crime, yea, even murder itself, when committed on such as are not of their religion. And seeing that this doctrine had led the accursed Achmath and his sons to act as they did without any sense of guilt, the Kaan was led to entertain the greatest disgust and abomination for it. So he summoned the Saracens, and prohibited their doing many things which their religion enjoined. Thus he ordered them to regulate their marriages by the Tartar law, and prohibited their cutting the throats of animals killed for food, ordering them to rip the stomach in the Tartar way. Now when all this happened, Messer Marco was upon the spot. Chapter 24. How the great Kaan causeth the bark of trees, made into something like paper, to pass for money over all his country. Now that I have told you in detail of the splendour of this city of the Emperor's, I shall proceed to tell you of the mint which he hath in the same city, in the which he hath his money coined and struck, as I shall relate to you. And in doing so, I shall make manifest to you how it is that the great lord may well be able to accomplish even much more than I have told you, or am going to tell you, in this book. For tell it how I might, you never would be satisfied that I was keeping within truth and reason. The Emperor's mint, then, is in this same city of Cambaluc, and the way it is wrought is such that you might say he hath the secret of alchemy in perfection, and you would be right, for he makes his money after this fashion. He makes them take of the bark of a certain tree, in fact of the mulberry tree, the leaves of which are the food of the silkworms, these trees being so numerous that whole districts are full of them. What they take is a certain fine white bast or skin which lies between the wood of the tree and the thick outer bark, and this they make into something resembling sheets of paper, but black. When these sheets have been prepared, they are cut up into pieces of different sizes. The smallest of these sizes is worth a half tournesol, the next a little larger, 1 tournesol. One a little larger still is worth half a silver groat in Venice, another a whole groat, others yet 2 groats, 5 groats, and 10 groats. There is also a kind worth 1 bezant of gold, and others of 3 bezants, and so up to 10. All these pieces of paper are issued with as much solemnity and authority as if they were of pure gold or silver, and on every piece a variety of officials whose duty it is, have to write their names and to put their seals, and when all is prepared duly, the chief officer deputed by the Kaan smears the seal entrusted to him with vermilion, and impresses it on the paper, so that the form of the seal remains printed upon it in red. The money is then authentic. Anyone forging it will be punished with death. And the Kaan causes every year to be made such a vast quantity of this money, which costs him nothing, that it must equal in amount all the treasure in the world. With these pieces of paper, made as I have described, he causes all payments on his own account to be made, and he makes them to pass current universally over all his kingdoms and provinces and territories, and whithersoever his power and sovereignty extends. And nobody, however important he may think himself, dares to refuse them on pain of death. And indeed everybody takes them readily, for wheresoever a person may go throughout the great Kaan's dominions, he shall find these pieces of paper current, and shall be made to transact all sales and purchases of goods by means of them, just as well as if they were coins of pure gold. And all the while they are so light that 10 bezants worth does not weigh 1 golden bezant. Furthermore, all merchants arriving from India or other countries, and bringing with them gold or silver or gems and pearls, are prohibited from selling to any one but the Emperor. He has 12 experts chosen for this business, men of shrewdness and experience in such affairs. These appraise the articles, and the Emperor then pays a liberal price for them in those pieces of paper. The merchants accept his price readily, for in the first place they would not get so good an one from anybody else, and second, they are paid without any delay. And with this paper money they can buy what they like anywhere over the empire, whilst it is also vastly lighter to carry about on their journeys. And it is a truth that the merchants will several times in a year bring wares to the amount of 400,000 bezants, and the grandsire pays for all in that paper. So he buys such a quantity of those precious things every year that his treasure is endless, whilst all the time the money he pays away costs him nothing at all. Moreover, several times in the year proclamation is made through the city that any one who may have gold or silver or gems or pearls, by taking them to the mint shall get a handsome price for them. And the owners are glad to do this, because they would find no other purchaser give so large a price. Thus the quantity they bring in is marvellous, though these who do not choose to do so may let it alone. Still, in this way, nearly all the valuables in the country come into the Kaan's possession. When any of those pieces of paper are spoilt, not that they are so very flimsy neither, the owner carries them to the mint, and by paying 3% on the value he gets new pieces in exchange. And if any baron or any one else soever hath need of gold or silver, or gems or pearls, in order to make plate, or girdles, or the like, he goes to the mint and buys as much as he list, paying in this paper money. Now you have heard the ways and means whereby the Great Kaan may have, and in fact has, more treasure than all the kings in the world, and you would know all about it and the reason why. And now I will tell you of the great dignitaries which act in this city on behalf of the Emperor. End of section 39.
Section 40 of the Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Roberts. The Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA. Translated by Henry YULE. Book 2nd, Part 1. Chapter 25, concerning the 12 barons who are set over all the affairs of the Great Kaan. You must know that the Great Kaan hath chosen 12 great barons, to whom he hath committed all the necessary affairs of 34 great provinces, and now I will tell you particulars about them and their establishments. You must know that these 12 barons reside all together in a very rich and handsome palace, which is inside the city of Cambaluc, and consists of a variety of edifices, with many suites of apartments. To every province is assigned a judge and several clerks, and all reside in this palace, where each has his separate quarters. These judges and clerks administer all the affairs of the provinces to which they are attached, under the direction of the 12 barons. Howbeit, when an affair is of very great importance, the 12 barons lay in before the emperor, and he decides as he thinks best. But the power of those 12 barons is so great that they choose the governors for all those 34 great provinces that I have mentioned, and only after they have chosen do they inform the emperor of their choice. This he confirms, and grants to the person nominated a tablet of gold, such as is appropriate to the rank of his government. Those 12 barons also have such authority that they can dispose of the movements of the forces, and send them whither and in such strength as they please. This is done indeed with the emperor's cognizance, but still the orders are issued on their authority. They are styled Xiang, which is as much as to say the Supreme Court, and the palace where they abide is also called Xiang. This body forms the highest authority at the court of the Great Kaan, and indeed they can favor and advance whom they will. I will not now name the 34 provinces to you, because they will be spoken of in detail in the course of this book. Chapter 26. How the Kaan's posts and runners are sped through many lands and provinces. Now you must know that from this city of Cambaluc proceed many roads and highways leading to a variety of provinces, one to one province, another to another, and each road receives the name of the province to which it leads, and it is a very sensible plan. And the messengers of the emperor, in travelling from Cambaluc, be the road whichsoever they will, find at every 25 miles of the journey a station, which they call Yam, or, as we would say, the horse-post house. And at each of these stations used by the messengers there is a large and handsome building for them to put up at, in which they find all the rooms furnished with fine beds, and all other necessary articles in rich silk, and where they are provided with everything they can want. If even a king were to arrive at one of these, he would find himself well lodged. At some of these stations, moreover, there shall be posted some 400 horses standing ready for the use of the messengers. At others there shall be 200, according to the requirements, and to what the emperor has established in each case. At every 25 miles, as I said, or anyhow at every 30 miles, you find one of these stations, on all the principal highways leading to the different provincial governments. And the same is the case throughout all the chief provinces subject to the Great Kaan. Even when the messengers have to pass through a roadless tract where neither house nor hostel exists, still there the station houses have been established just the same, excepting that the intervals are somewhat greater, and the day's journey is fixed at 35 to 45 miles, instead of 25 to 30. But they are provided with horses and all the other necessaries just like those we have described, so that the emperor's messengers, come they from what region they may, find everything ready for them. And in sooth, this is a thing done on the greatest scale of magnificence that ever was seen. Never had emperor, king, or lord such wealth as this manifests. For it is a fact that on all these posts taken together there are more than 300,000 horses kept up, specially for the use of the messengers. And the great buildings that I have mentioned are more than 10,000 in number, all richly furnished, as I told you. The thing is on a scale so wonderful and costly that it is hard to bring oneself to describe it. But now I will tell you another thing that I had forgotten, but which ought to be told whilst I am on this subject. You must know that by the great Khan's orders there has been established between these post-houses, at every interval of 3 miles, a little fort, with some 40 houses round about it, in which dwell the people who act as the emperor's foot-runners. Every one of those runners wears a great wide belt, set all over with bells, so that as they run the 3 miles from post to post, their bells are heard jingling a long way off, and thus on reaching the post, the runner finds another man similarly equipped, and all ready to take his place, who instantly takes over whatsoever he has in charge, and with it receives a slip of paper from the clerk, who is always at hand for the purpose, and so the new man sets off and runs his 3 miles. At the next station he finds his relief ready in like manner, and so the post proceeds, with a change at every 3 miles. And in this way the emperor, who has an immense number of these runners, receives dispatches with news from places 10 days' journey off in 1 day and night, or, if need be, news from 100 days off in 10 days and nights, and that is no small matter. In fact, in the fruit season, many a time fruit shall be gathered one morning in Cambaluc, and the evening of the next day it shall reach the great Khan at Chandu, a distance of 10 days' journey. The clerk at each of the posts notes the time of each courier's arrival and departure, and there are often other officers whose business it is to make monthly visitations of all the posts and to punish those runners who have been slack in their work. The emperor exempts these men from all tribute and pays them besides. Moreover, there are also at those stations other men equipped similarly with girdles hung with bells, who are employed for expresses when there is a call for great haste in sending dispatches to any governor of a province, or to give news when any baron has revolted, or in other such emergencies, and these men travel a good 200 or 250 miles in the day, and as much in the night. I'll tell you how it stands. They take a horse from those at the station which are standing ready saddled, all fresh and in wind, and mount and go at full speed, as hard as they can ride, in fact. And when those at the next post hear the bells, they get ready another horse and a man equipped in the same way, and he takes over the letter, or whatever it be, and is off full speed to the 3rd station, where again a fresh horse is found already, and so the dispatch speeds along from post to post, always at full gallop, with regular change of horses. And the speed at which they go is marvellous. By night, however, they cannot go so fast as by day, because they have to be accompanied by footmen with torches, who could not keep up with them at full speed. Those men are highly prized, and they could never do it did they not bind hard the stomach, chest, and head with strong bands. And each of them carries with him a gerfalcon tablet, in sign that he is bound on an urgent express, so that if perchance his horse break down, or he meet with other mishap, whomsoever he may fall in with on the road, he is empowered to make him dismount and give up his horse. Nobody dares refuse in such a case, so that the courier hath always a good fresh nag to carry him. Now all these numbers of post-horses cost the emperor nothing at all, and I will tell you the how and the why. Every city or village or hamlet that stands near one of those post stations has a fixed demand made on it for as many horses as it can supply, and these it must furnish to the post. And in this way are provided all the posts of the cities, as well as the towns and villages round about them, only in uninhabited tracts the horses are furnished at the expense of the emperor himself. Nor do the cities maintain the full number, say of 400 horses, always at their station, but month by month 200 shall be kept at the station, and the other 200 at grass, coming in their turn to relieve the first 200. And if there chance to be some river or lake to be passed by the runners and horse posts, the neighboring cities are bound to keep 3 or 4 boats in constant readiness for the purpose. And now I will tell you of the great bounty exercised by the emperor towards his people twice a year. Chapter 27. How the emperor bestows help on his people when they are afflicted with death or murrain. Now you must know that the emperor sends his messengers over all his lands and kingdoms and provinces to ascertain from his officers if the people are afflicted by any dearth, through unfavorable seasons, or storms, or locusts, or other like calamity, and from those who have suffered in this way no taxes are exacted for that year. Nay, more, he causes them to be supplied with corn of his own for food and seed. Now this is undoubtedly a great bounty on his part, and when winter comes, he causes inquiry to be made as to those who have lost their cattle, whether by murrain or other mishap, and such persons not only go scot-free, but get presents of cattle. And thus, as I tell you, the Lord every year helps and fosters the people subject to him. There is another trait of the great Kaan I should tell you, and that is, that if a chance shot from his bow strike any herd or flock, whether belonging to one person or to many, and however big the flock may be, he takes no tithe thereof for 3 years. In like manner, if the arrow strike a boat full of goods, that boatload pays no duty, for it is thought unlucky that an arrow strike anyone's property, and the great Kaan says it would be an abomination before God, were such property, that has been struck by the divine wrath, to enter into his treasury. Chapter 28. How the great Kaan causes trees to be planted by the highways. The emperor, moreover, hath taken order that all the highways travelled by his messengers, and the people, generally should be planted with rows of great trees a few paces apart, and thus these trees are visible a long way off, and no one can miss the way by day or night. Even the roads through uninhabited tracts are thus planted, and it is the greatest possible solace to travellers, and this is done on all the ways where it can be of service. The great Kaan plants these trees all the more readily because his astrologers and diviners tell him that he who plants trees lives long. But where the ground is so sandy and desert that trees will not grow, he causes other landmarks, pillars, or stones, to be set up to show the way. End of section 40.
Section 41 of the Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian, concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA. Translated by Henry YULE. Book 2nd, Part 1, Chapters 29 to 34. Chapter 29. Concerning the rice wine drunk by the people of Cathay. Most of the people of Cathay drink wine of the kind that I shall now describe. It is a liquor which they brew of rice with a quantity of excellent spice, in such fashion that it makes better drink than any other kind of wine. It is not only good, but clear and pleasing to the eye, and being very hot stuff, it makes one drunk sooner than any other wine. Chapter 30. Concerning the black stones that are dug in Cathay and are burned for fuel. It is a fact that all over the country of Cathay there is a kind of black stones existing in beds in the mountains, which they dig out and burn like firewood. If you supply the fire with them at night, and see that they are well kindled, you will find them still alight in the morning, and they make such capital fuel that no other is used throughout the country. It is true that they have plenty of wood also, but they do not burn it, because those stones burn better and cost less. Moreover, with that vast number of people, and the number of hot baths that they maintain, for everyone has such a bath at least 3 times a week, and in winter if possible every day, whilst every nobleman and man of wealth has a private bath for his own use. The wood would not suffice for the purpose. Chapter 31. How the great Kaan causes stores of corn to be made, to help his people withal in time of dearth. You must know that when the Emperor sees that corn is cheap and abundant, he buys up large quantities, and has it stored in all his provinces in great granaries, where it is so well looked after that it will keep for 3 or 4 years. And this applies, let me tell you, to all kinds of corn, whether wheat, barley, millet, rice, panic, or what not, and when there is any scarcity of a particular kind of corn, he causes that to be issued. And if the price of corn is at 1 bezant the measure, he lets them have it at a bezant for 4 measures, or at whatever price will produce general cheapness, and everyone can have food in this way. And by this providence of the emperors, his people can never suffer from dearth. He does the same over his whole empire, causing these supplies to be stored everywhere, according to calculation of the wants and necessities of the people. Chapter 32. Of the charity of the Emperor to the poor. I have told you how the great Kaan provides for the distribution of necessaries to his people in time of dearth by making store in time of cheapness. Now I will tell you of his alms and great charity to the poor of his city of Cambaluc. You see, he causes a selection to be made of a number of families in the city which are in a state of indigence, and of such families some may consist of 6 in the house, some of 8, some of 10, more or fewer in each as it may hap, but the whole number being very great. And each family he causes annually to be supplied with wheat and other corn sufficient for the whole year. And this he never fails to do every year. Moreover, all those who choose to go to the daily dole at the court receive a great loaf apiece, hot from the baking, and nobody is denied. For so the Lord hath ordered. And so some 30,000 people go for it every day from year's end to year's end. Now this is a great goodness in the Emperor to take pity of his poor people thus, and they benefit so much by it that they worship him as he were God. He also provides the poor with clothes, for he lays a tithe upon all wool, silk, hemp, and the like, from which clothing can be made, and he has these woven and laid up in a building set apart for the purpose. And as all artisans are bound to give a day's labour weekly, in this way the Kaan has these stuffs made into clothing for those poor families, suitable for summer or winter, according to the time of year. He also provides the clothing for his troops, and has woolens woven for them in every city, the material for which is furnished by the tithe aforesaid. You should know that the Tartars, before they were converted to the religion of the idolaters, never practiced almsgiving. Indeed, when any poor man begged of them, they would tell him, "Go with God's curse, for if he loved you as he loves me, he would have provided for you." But the sages of the idolaters, and especially the Baksis, mentioned before, told the great Kaan that it was a good work to provide for the poor, and that his idols would be greatly pleased if he did so. And since then he has taken to do for the poor so much as you've heard. Chapter 33. Concerning the astrologers in the city of Cambaluc. There are in the city of Cambaluc, what with Christians, Saracens, and Cathayans, some 5,000 astrologers and soothsayers, whom the great Kaan provides with annual maintenance and clothing, just as he provides the poor of whom we have spoken, and they are in the constant exercise of their art in this city. They have a kind of astrolabe on which are inscribed the planetary signs, the hours, and critical points of the whole year. And every year these Christian, Saracen, and Cathayan astrologers, each sect apart, investigate by means of this astrolabe the course and character of the whole year, according to the indications of each of its moons, in order to discover, by the natural course and disposition of the planets, and the other circumstances of the heavens, what shall be the nature of the weather, and what peculiarities shall be produced by each moon of the year; as, for example, under which moon there shall be thunderstorms and tempests, under which there shall be disease, murrain, wars, disorders, and treasons, and so on, according to the indications of each, but always adding that it lies with God to do less or more according to his pleasure. And they write down the results of their examination in certain little pamphlets for the year, which are called takuan, and these are sold for groat to all who desire to know what is coming. Those of the astrologers, of course, whose predictions are found to be most exact, are held to be the greatest adepts in their art, and get the greater fame. And if anyone having some great matter in hand, or proposing to make a long journey for traffic or other business, desires to know what will be the upshot, he goes to one of these astrologers and says, "Turn up your books and see what is the present aspect of the heavens, for I am going away on such and such a business." Then the astrologer will reply that the applicant must also tell the year, month, and hour of his birth, and when he has got that information he will see how the horoscope of his nativity combines with the indications of the time when the question is put, and then he predicts the result, good or bad, according to the aspect of the heavens. You must know, too, that the Tartars reckon their years by 12s, the sign of the first year being the lion, of the second the ox, of the third the dragon, of the 4th the dog, and so forth up to the 12th, so that when one is asked the year of his birth, he answers that it was in the year of the lion, let us say, on such a day or night, at such an hour, and such a moment. And the father of a child always takes care to write these particulars down in a book. When the 12 yearly symbols have been gone through, then they come back to the first, and go through with them again in the same succession. Chapter 34. Concerning the religion of the Cathayans, their views as to the soul, and their customs. As we've said before, these people are idolaters, and as regards their gods, each has a tablet fixed high up on the wall of his chamber, on which is inscribed a name which represents the most high and heavenly God, and before this they pay daily worship, offering incense from a thurible, raising their hands aloft, and gnashing their teeth 3 times, praying him to grant them health of mind and body. But of him they ask naught else. And below on the ground there is a figure which they call Natigai, which is the god of things terrestrial. To him they give a wife and children, and they worship him in the same manner, with incense and gnashing of teeth, and lifting up of hands, and of him they ask seasonable weather, and the fruits of the earth, children, and so forth. Their view of the immortality of the soul is after this fashion. They believe that as soon as a man dies, his soul enters into another body, going from a good to a better, or from a bad to a worse, according as he hath conducted himself well or ill. That is to say, a poor man, if he pass through life good and sober, shall be born again of a gentlewoman, and shall be a gentleman; and on a second occasion shall be born of a princess, and shall be a prince, and so on, always rising, till he be absorbed into the deity. But if he have borne himself ill, he who was the son of a gentleman shall be reborn as the son of a boor, and from a boor shall become a dog, always going down lower and lower. The people have an ornate style of speech. They salute each other with a cheerful countenance, and with great politeness. They behave like gentlemen, and eat with great propriety. They show great respect to their parents, and should there be any son who offends his parents, or fails to minister to their necessities, there is a public office which has no other charge but that of punishing unnatural children, who are proved to have acted with ingratitude towards their parents. Criminals of sundry kinds who have been imprisoned are released at a time fixed by the Great Kaan, which occurs every 3 years, but on leaving prison they are branded on one cheek that they may be recognized. The Great Kaan hath prohibited all gambling and sharping, things more prevalent there than in any other part of the world. In doing this he said, "I have conquered you by force of arms, and all that you have is mine. If therefore you gamble away your property, it is in fact my property that you are gambling away." Not that he took anything from them, however. I must not omit to tell you of the orderly way in which the Kaan's barons and others conduct themselves in coming to his presence. In the first place, within a half-mile of the place where he is, out of reverence for his exalted majesty, everybody preserves a mien of the greatest meekness and quiet, so that no noise of shrill voices or loud talk shall be heard. And every one of the chiefs and nobles carries always with him a handsome little vessel to spit in whilst he remain in the hall of audience, for no one dares spit on the floor of the hall, and when he has spitten he covers it up and puts it aside. So also they all have certain handsome buskins of white leather, which they carry with them, and, when summoned by the sovereign, on arriving at the entrance to the hall, they put on these white buskins, and give their others in charge to the servants, in order that they may not foul the fine carpets of silk and gold and divers colours. End of section 41. End of the book of Sir Marco Polo the Venetian concerning the kingdoms and marvels of the East, Volume 1, by Rustichello da PISA, translated by Henry YULE.